Hello, everybody, and welcome to my fifth episode of the Love Bomb Chat series. I am joined by the lovely Bookborn today, who is my first Booktube friend of all the Booktube friends that I have made so far, and really is probably the reason I have a Booktube channel because I started harassing you about Wheel of Time stuff on Instagram during the first season
Is that
run.
what happened? I can never
Yeah.
remember. It's like whenever I
Mhm.
become friends with someone, it's like we weren't and then we were. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened in between.
Yeah, Josh and we watched the first episode or first three, and I was like, I wonder if someone's done a comparison to show and book. We found you, and then I messaged you on Instagram, and I was like, oh, I really loved your analysis. And then I kept pestering you with all your
I
videos.
do remember we used to talk on your food account. Like
Yes.
that's how
Yes.
it started. Food
That
account,
was
Laura.
before I had my Fantasy Awash Instagram, and then I was like, oh, I should probably stop harassing Bookborn and just start harassing the internet in general and start talking at YouTube. And then I started reading Mistborn, which I messaged you about, and I was like, oh, I
Remember
think
that.
I'm gonna do it. So that was fun, and that was pretty much
I just
how
didn't
it
remember that it was
started.
Wheel of Time. For some reason, I thought it was a Sanderson thing.
I think
Um,
it started Wheel of Time and then it quickly became Sanderson because I was like, oh, she really likes Brandon Sanderson because I had no idea that BookTube existed until I found that. And then I was like, oh, okay, people actually talk about books on YouTube. It's not just music. Which like I don't know why I never put two and two together for that. I was like, oh, YouTube is free music, and that's literally the only thing on YouTube. Like
I mean, I
I
didn't know
could not
Booktube
make better.
existed until I started mine. So similar.
There you go. So it ended up working out that way. And then I started seeing from your account other people's accounts, and Sanderson kind of kept coming up as Mistborn, best new fantasy, new being like modern fantasy
Yeah.
trilogy that everyone should read. And I sat back and I watched a non-spoilery video about Mistborn, and I was like, I think I'm gonna give it a go and see if I like it. Bookborn talks about him a lot, and she and I agreed on Wheel of Time, so maybe we'll agree on Mistborn. And then I went through
Read
that
them all in a
trilogy and
year.
like, yeah, I read them all in a year. So, I haven't finished Sunlit Man though, so that's my last one. But
You almost read them all in a year.
almost read them all in a year, which I was kind of bummed initially that I didn't make my own set deadline, but it's okay.
I mean, I feel like it was a little unfair that you started a year where he published 4
I
additional
know.
full-length novels. Like I feel
No, Evie, I promise.
yeah,
Yes.
this is important. So I want to say this though before we move on, which
Mhm.
is I like to keep a list of good things that came out of my Wheel of Time videos, like good people, because I have such like bitterness towards everybody when I finish a season of those shows. That
Yes.
I have to remember, like, oh, there are a few really nice, normal people that came to my channel because of the Wheel of Time videos, so it's like a good memory.
That's always good too.
Like,
Okay, so
okay,
usually when I start the love bomb chats, I ask whoever I'm speaking to, what is the last book you read that you really loved, or is there a book that you're reading currently that you really love?
it's a great question. What have I read in January?
Well, I know that you're kind of going through like an era of of A Song of Ice and Fire, but I don't know if you've jumped back in yet fully with Feast for Crows.
I haven't yet. That's actually, like I'm starting it. Like, I thought I was gonna start it today, but I just didn't have time. Right before we got on here, I told Laura about what happened to me today, which was that I went to clean my house and instead of cleaned out my house and made my problem like 800 times worse. So I didn't get to read today. I'm trying to finish Gaiman's last short story collection that I haven't finished, Smoke and
Fragile
Mirrors.
Things or Trigger
Oh
Warning?
no, I've read Trigger Warning. I've read Smoke and Mirrors. I'm doing
Fragile Things.
Fragile Things.
Yeah.
Um, and I have like 4 stories left. So I kept being like, oh, I'll finish. It's fine. I'll finish it so fast. And it's been like 2 days. I read
Mhm.
the Sanderson Curiosity instead last night. So like, anyway,
Yep.
we're just Feast of Crows is next. I guess A Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
Did you love it?
I loved it.
Isn't it
Loved
so
it.
good?
So
It's so
good.
good. Yeah,
So
I
good.
love
It was like a
it.
4.5 star. Loved it.
I agreed. I watched your breakdown of it. I haven't read it in probably 8 years. And I remember, yeah, it's been a hot minute, but I remember when I read it, I actually did the audiobook for that. That was probably the first audiobook I ever listened to, and then went on a massive hiatus for audiobooks until last year. Yeah. Yeah, but the narrator for that one is Harry Lloyd, who I know you are not planning on watching the show, but he played Daenerys's brother in the show and has a really great voice for audiobooks, which I was kind of surprised by and loved them. And also thought the second story was my favorite when we were listening to it, because we were listening to it on a car trip. Speaking of those, a long car drive.
Speaking of.
Yes, but those stories in general, I super love. And I believe they're supposed to be adapted relatively soon.
They are. It got greenlit. Everyone's been telling me. So I'm going to trust the internet.
I'm sure Jimmy has told you like 6 times.
Kyle's the one who told me. And he was like, and you can watch this one. And I was like, maybe. Because my theory is that like now there's this dumb idea that Game of Thrones has to be a certain thing. And that certain thing is graphic in a certain way, even though like face value, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms seems like something I could absolutely watch, no problem.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious. I do want to say though, sorry, I got distracted by the comments. There is a bind up of all the introductions Gaiman has written. It's that nonfiction, Matt. It's the nonfiction book that I put on my top 5 last year. It has like almost all of his introductions. Yes. It's like most of it is introductions that he's written.
And it's amazing.
It's incredible.
Incredible. I love Neil Gaiman. It's not a surprise to like anyone that follows my channel regularly. I'm going to see him again in July, which I'm very excited about.
I'm so jealous. He's coming over there?
He is. He's going to DC, and that's about an hour and a half from where we are, but it's close to my in-laws. So I'm like,
he never comes to the West Coast.
I don't know if he does or not quite regularly, because he lives, I believe, in Minnesota, and then I feel like he just goes east.
I think he's just like, what's over there? Like, nothing.
So I'm not really sure, but if you want to fly to DC and come see a Neil Gaiman in July, then, I definitely do that.
Don't know if I could justify it. I was going to say, I don't know if I told you this, but like, I'm just trying to finish up his whole bibliography because I realized I was really close. So, that's why I'm kind of on like a last kick, like push to get through it. Because we actually, I went to our local library and we have put on hold all of his children's books. So I can do those as well, because I've only read like a couple. So we have 10 from the library right now just sitting on our shelves. We're waiting for 2 more. And I had my daughter rank them with me. So we both ranked the children's books. So I'm like, I really will, I think, have read all besides his comics. Because I looked at I've read what his website considers to be his bibliography. If you look up on another site, it'll list like every comic.
Yes.
Like Batman story he's ever written. And I'm like,
And I think, did you read any? I feel like you read a couple of the Sandman volumes.
Yeah, correct? I read 30 of the Sandman.
Oh, okay. So you did like a good chunk of it.
Yeah, it was in one of those editions where they just bound up like the first 30.
Yeah.
So I feel like I did Sandman. That's the important one to do. And then, we've already talked about you.
Yeah.
What's up?
That is true. So I loved that you loved Anansi Boys not that long ago, because I love Anansi Boys so much, and no one really talks about this book.
I'm surprised. It's very I know it's supposed to be in the same world as American Gods.
Yeah.
But it's like clearly a spiritual successor to it as well. So I'm confused at maybe people just don't know about it, because American Gods is so highly regarded.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. The vibe is completely different between the 2 stories. American Gods being quite dark, and Anansi Boys, I actually was laughing out loud while reading it. To me, it was more akin to Good Omens, just in terms of the humor it hit for me.
It's American Gods, but happy.
Yes, exactly. American Gods. There you go. My last Gaiman novel. And then,
wait, last isn't the last one you need to get to, or last is the last one you just read?
Yeah, gotta be specific.
I actually should know this because we've talked about it, Kyle, but I forgot. Now he can yell at me at that
There
about
you
that.
go. But I love that book so much. Spider, I think, is such an underrated character in terms of all of Neil's characters. I think they're so good.
I mean, okay, I was pretty sure that was it, Kyle, because I was like, we would have talked about it. I think
Agreed.
yeah, we talked about that too. Because Neverwhere was my first Gaiman. My
Mhm.
sister sent it to me because it was her favorite book, and I was like, this is fine. And then I did not read another Neil Gaiman for like 4 years
Yeah.
because I was like,
Yeah.
what's with this? But I think my favorite Neil, is when he's exploring like the god stuff because Norse
Mhm.
mythology, American gods, and
So
Anansi
good.
Boys are like 3 of my favorites. And
Yeah.
even his short stories, his religious ones tend to often
Yeah.
be my favorite.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
for me, it's him at his best usually.
I agree. My first Neil was Stardust, which I liked
Okay.
enough to keep reading his stuff, but I was like, it's kind of mid in terms of his overall catalog of books, I felt like. And then I read American Gods next and was hooked. I was so
So
invested in that book because I'm obsessed with mythology and religion. And at that point was in school studying
yeah, we
classical
talked about that.
history. Yeah. And it was just like everywhere. So was super engrossed in that. And then I read Good Omens after, which of course deals with like religious subject matter in a
Oh, yeah, Good
very
Omens is
humorous
my favorite
way.
too. I forgot
Yeah,
because that's a
Good
Pratchett
Omens.
and a Gaiman.
Exactly. So it's a combo. But I don't know if you know this, that was originally just Neil's story. And then
I
Pratchett
read
wanted to
about
buy
it.
it from him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I love how that came together. And the Norse mythology book also is just chef's kiss perfection. I love all of that stuff. But in terms of his short stories, have you read the ones with shadow? Like, are you at that point? Or because I feel like I can never remember if they're in trigger warning or in fragile things.
I've definitely read it, and I think it was in trigger warning because
Yes.
I remember reading it, but don't remember at all what it was about, and I read trigger warning, like, 3 years ago, so I feel or,
Yeah.
like, 2 years ago,
There's
so I feel
one
like
in
it's
a
in trigger
lock.
warning.
It's like in a lock in Scotland. That's the one that I remember
Yeah,
mostly.
that
There
sounds
might be
familiar to
2.
me.
I can't fully remember.
I
But
can't remember. That's why it must be in trigger warning because I just read the other 2 collections recently.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so I read Neverwhere, and then my next Gaiman was actually Ocean at the End of the Lane. I see a lot of people talking about it, and I
Yes.
love Ocean.
Yeah.
And then I read
Super
American
weird.
Gods, and it was so funny because in 3 books, I went from, "I don't ever need to read another Gaiman," to reading American Gods and being like, "I'm gonna read every Gaiman that ever existed."
Ever existed.
Because all of a sudden I think it was because I realized that his books are also different. Because
Yeah.
Neverwhere and Ocean and American Gods are, like, so different,
Yes.
and I loved 2 of them, so all of a sudden it was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, the fact that I bounced off one probably doesn't mean much in the
Sure.
grand scheme of things." And I
Yeah.
still do bounce off a Gaiman, although I will say I've never hated one. Like, the worst a Gaiman
Yeah.
is for me is average. It is
Yeah. I felt that
never
way about Neverwhere.
yes. I gave it a
That
3, you know?
Yeah, that was basically where I landed with it. I was like, okay, I'm never going to come back to this.
Yeah.
But I feel the same way. And that's why whenever I try to convince someone to read Neil Gaiman, I'm like, hardly 2 of his books will sound similar. I'm like, it's just, they're so individual and unique in their voice. And themes can overlap and be similar, like the religious tones and that type of thing. But his voice is so specific in each story. It's just
Neil,
wild.
like, having read so many Neil Gaimans over, like, the last 2 years, very, like, together, I see, like, a lot of the things is, like, I want to look at things from the opposite perspective. So
Mhm.
much of his stuff is like, well, what if, Snow White was from this, I mean, so many of his stories are like that. Like,
Mhm.
well, okay, well, what if this was the creation of the world, but from Lucifer's perspective?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of Good Omens as well in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but like so many of his books, like that is a theme I see all the time. Is just
Mhm.
like, but what if we didn't think about it the way we thought about it?
Mhm.
Um, and that's to varying degrees of success.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
ultimately, it's always kind of fascinating. But he has a very specific voice that's very hard to describe, but, like,
It does.
you're reading Neil Gaiman. Like, I'm reading these children's books, And like for the most part, you're like, well, this is just like a Neil Gaiman story.
Yeah, but it's been sized down for small people.
Yeah, like I don't even, and sometimes I'm like, I don't even know if this is for small people. They just put a cute picture on it.
Yeah, we bought a ton of them when I was pregnant, but I was buying them more so for me than I was for our daughter. I was like, I want to own them. And I remember we would do this thing when I was very heavily pregnant. I was like, okay, we're gonna read to the bump to like try to get her out of me because I just hated being pregnant so much. So we
definitely bonded over that a lot.
Yeah. So we started reading through all of these children books, and we got.
Wait, I want to say something to Derry. When we mean children's books, we mean his actual children's book, not his middle grade books. He has picture books. These are picture books.
Yeah, like for infants.
Yeah.
He really, and that's part of it too, Derry. He's one of the only authors that basically starts from like the moment you're born and writes until you die. He is very covered in terms of age groups, but Blueberry Girl, I don't know if you've read that one yet. When we got through it, I loved it. And Josh was like, what is this?
So this I told Zach, I said, Blueberry Girl, this is spoilers for what I'm going to say in my video someday, but Blueberry Girl is the kind of book you slice the pages out of and hang in a nursery because it is for the mother or the father or whatever, the parent. It is not for the child. Like I read that out loud to my daughter and she was like, okay. Like, and I was like, oh, this is so sweet.
Yeah.
So nice.
100%.
And there's a few like that, which is like Blueberry Girl, I feel like is a ton like that. But then you have the opposite, like Tuesday. Yeah. Those are all like actually like I'm gonna buy those for kids. Like those are like kid books for kids, very cute. Yeah, anyway. But Blueberry Girl, yeah, that's totally not
a good one. Yeah, like the Milk one is a great one, actually.
Actually, the Milk, that's kind of older though, because it's not like a picture book.
Yeah, I think it's more.
But that actually is one of my favorite Gaiman's.
I do love that one. I would probably put that in like the 7 to 8 age group, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I read it out loud to my daughter and she loved it.
Okay, so
at 4.
Yeah,
but it's a chapter book, so they need to have a longer attention span. So I probably would also put it in like the 6+ range. In general, it's kind of like going. It's a young reader. That's what it is.
That's what it's called.
It's a young reader.
My mom would be very ashamed of me because she writes children's books and I never remember the proper terminology ever. So, sorry,
I feel like I have to know now. See, you're going to know in a few years when your daughter is older because you live through it. Like once you live through it, then you know what it all is.
Yeah.
But yeah, his picture books are hit or miss for me. Some of them are like some of my very favorites, and some of them I'm like, it's fine.
Have you read Pirates Stew yet? Is that one of them?
Yes. Yes. How do you feel about Pirates Stew?
I like it. It's weird, but I like it.
So Pirates Stew was fine to me. Like I read it and I'm like, this is fine. Nothing to write home about. My daughter, it is the best book she's ever read. Like Pirates Stew to her is like nothing can beat it because it's so funny because, you know, she's 5. And so she'll be like to her teacher, she's like, oh, we're picking up another Neil Gaiman book today. And I'm like, that is so weird coming out of like this tiny human.
Person.
But to her, she's like, nothing will beat Pirates Stew. She's made me read it like 10 times. And I don't love it. So I'm like, why this one? It's the longest one. It's so long.
So funny. It is long. It is one of the longer ones for sure.
It's cute. It's just like I don't feel like super
attached to it. We got that Dangerous ABCs book of his too, which
she hated it.
I love it so much, but again, that's not one that I feel is actually meant for children. I feel like it's meant for adults.
I really enjoyed like the art and the words in that. My daughter was like, I think I wrote it down what she said because it was so funny. It was something like, that was really weird and I didn't like it. Like that's currently her bottom ranked one right now. And it's like not even allowed to be in the pile. Like, so this is so like, funny. It's not properly ranked. This is giving away all of it, but that's fine. I liked to. So like, that's the thing, like Blueberry Girl, Dangerous Alphabet, those are more like adult children's books. It'll be interesting to see your daughter and what she ends up liking. Cause I do think like some of the children's books parents like the best, like there's a weird middle line of like things that parents love and kids love. and then what the kids love and what the parents love. I don't know.
Yeah, right now we're into this book called Woodland Dance by Sandra Boynton. That's like her favorite, which Josh and I can recite by heart because of how many times we've read this book. I'm like, great.
I've got so many by heart.
Yeah, it's the best. So I have a mug with me tonight. Do you have a mug with water? Because I know you also collect mugs.
I usually always do have a mug with water. I don't even have any water. Here, I'm going to text Zach to bring me water in a mug, and we'll see which one he brings it in. You bring
I know
me a
you
mug
also
with
love
water.
mugs the same way I do because I always think
I
that's really
only drink
funny.
out of mugs.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. And Zach is always like, you've inflicted our house with this sickness because my kids now only drink out of mugs. And he's the only one who uses our glasses, but we have to be adults. Like if we have people over and serve glasses and not like, here's everyone's mismatched mug for the evening.
Are you collecting a certain kind or is it just kind of any mug that you like?
Just any I like. A lot are given to me. They're mostly like stupid phrase mugs or nerdy mugs. You know, I actually do have one glass I do actually like drinking out of, which is when we did book club for Trust of the Emerald Sea. You know, she collects mugs.
Yeah.
And as a part of that book club, they took us to a leather journal making class in I mean, this wasn't on like air, right? They just took us to do this fun thing. And
that's awesome.
I don't know. I can't believe I can't remember where it is. It's a ski resort in
Somewhere
Utah.
in
Whatever. Someone tell me. Ski resort in Utah. And we went there and they sold recycled glass. Like they
cool.
made glasses there out of like all this recycled glass. So we all bought one as like a memory of the book club.
Yeah.
And so that's super precious to me. It's not a mug, but I did have that. And we all collectively love this glass. And Zach's like, you should just buy a set of glasses because then we'll have glasses that people will use.
Yeah.
Anyway, they don't sell them online. So I told Zach next year when we go to Dragonsteel, we should carve out an extra day to go drive an hour to this place and just ship ourselves like a bunch of these glasses.
I wouldn't judge. I would probably have Josh do a similar thing. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, just like, and then I'd be less stressed because I do get stressed when because my kids love the glass, and I'm like, but this is like the one glass I don't want to break because it's a memory.
Yeah, I get that. So my mugs that I collect are these Molly Hatch ones that have these animals on them. And I get very particular if like people are cavalier with them. I'm like, guys, they don't make them anymore. Oh, excellent.
Cat bus.
I love
it. I bought this for my daughter for Christmas because she's obsessed with Totoro. So this is actually my daughter's mug, and hopefully she'll be okay she's very possessive actually over this mug.
You gotta be possessive over some things. It's fine. The way that I am over my mugs.
They don't make those anymore. That is an issue.
No, they do not. And I have a thing where Josh gets me one every Christmas. Like, and I've told him, I'm like, you should probably stock up and then just give them to me once a year because you're not going to be
finding them on eBay. Where is he finding them?
Yeah, on eBay. eBay, and I can't remember the name of that other secondhand online thing, but whatever it is.
More Carrie?
That's exactly what it is. Thank you.
I've never shopped there, but I know of it.
You can get secondhand mugs there if you really ever wanted to. But yeah, I love these so much. And yeah, I always
How many are there?
I think when they made their original run that there was probably like 25 or 30 different animals on them. And they were carried through Anthropology for like a 6-month run. And I went initially and I got a few of them and I was like, okay, I love these because they have llamas on them, the ones that I originally bought. And I love llamas. They're basically my favorite animals. So I was like, well, this is great. And then started seeing that they had ridiculous animals on them like geese. And I was like, well, we should have all of them.
Wait, can you hold yours up again? What animals tonight? Did I miss it when he brought me in?
This is a fake animal and it's a jackalope.
A jackalope. Okay. I love it. Instantly.
Yeah. But I love all of them so much. So they're delightful. And you and I both have a mug collection obsession. So it's something that we
I like
share.
that yours have like a theme though.
They do. Yeah.
You could serve them at company because it wouldn't be like
Yeah.
you get a Hogwarts mug, you get a cat bus mug, you get a D&D mug with a creature in it.
I mean,
Like,
I like all of those things though, so I'm not upset if someone were to bring those out. That wouldn't be the worst thing. But speaking of, you and I are also very big Harry Potter fans, but you're probably the biggest Harry Potter fan that I know. And likely one of the only other Ravenclaws that I know that like we actively are like, I was texting Bookborn about this because this is very much a first world problem a couple weeks ago where I was like, I'm going to New York in March and they open the Harry Potter store there and I want to go. And all of the Ravenclaw clothing is wrong because they've made the logo from the movies. And it's
I loved what you said was it's wrong. And then I texted you back and said, "Oh, it's the wrong colors and it's the wrong bird." Like you didn't have to tell me what was wrong. I knew already what was wrong.
Exactly. It's just wrong. But I felt like that was kind of a Ravenclaw-esque thing a little bit. But yeah. What is your favorite?
To do it to the Ravenclaws of all houses. It's like, do it to the Hufflepuffs. They're not going to complain if you put the wrong animal or color on theirs. They're just going to go with it and it's going to be fine. The Gryffindors aren't paying attention.
No.
So they don't care.
No.
What has a Gryffindor cared about that? Maybe the Slytherins. They're the only other people who care about it.
Yeah, I'm married to a Slytherin and he would be a little bitter about it. But yeah. I don't know if we talked about which of your books is the favorite for you, though, of Harry Potter.
Oh, 3 and 5.
See, I'm 3 also, and I also love 5 so much. Didn't love it when I read it through the first time when I was younger, and then going back and rereading it as an adult, I was like, oh, 5 is fire. It's so good.
It's funny because I loved 5 immediately when it came out, and a lot of people didn't. And it's funny because when I read it, I think one of the most important things that I always tell people is that I read book 5 when I was 15.
Yeah, same.
And the thing is Harry is kind of insufferable in book 5. But
yes, he is.
It was one of the weirdest experiences of my life because I read it so much and then I took like, I don't know, a few years break and I read it like when I was 20 again after like taking maybe a year or something off, 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, Harry is so angsty.
Yeah.
But as a 15-year-old, I specifically remember thinking, why is everyone being rude to Harry? He's right. Like, because I was 15 and everything Harry was saying to me was like reasonable. Yeah. Like, and so I will always defend angsty Harry as like an accurate portrayal of a 15-year-old because it is annoying when you're older, but when you're 15, that's how it feels.
I agree. And Kyle, you are incorrect. 4 is the worst movie. And it's 4.
Everyone's incorrect. All the movies are bad.
Yeah, but I was on a live with Alan not that long ago, and because I got the Mina Lima ones for Christmas that I was telling you about, and I was rereading the first one.
Just out of screen.
Yeah, and I was reading the first one again, and I was like, oh, like I've missed being in this world. It's been a long time, whatever. And we were talking about it, and I was like, but book 3 is probably my favorite. And he was like, no, that's wrong. It's 4. And I was like, no, it's 3, Alan.
You know what? I'll tell you this. This is another spicy take. You're like the most boring person if you think 4 is the best. Like 4 is what everyone answers. Like 4 is Zach's favorite. 4 is like, there's a competition. 4 won the Hugo. Okay, you are basic if you like 4 the best. It takes courage to have another one be your favorite. And
you heard it here, guys. Courage from the Ravenclaws is that book 3 is the contender.
And it is book 3. I do wonder, book 3 fans, book 3 is a very Hermione-centered book. And as girls who like Hermione was the revelation,
the standard,
self-insert, the whatever, I do think that's why like a lot of people may really feel strongly about book 3. I think that's why I feel so strongly about book 3. And Sirius is one of my top 3 characters, and that's where he's like introduced.
I was gonna say Sirius enters the chat, and I love Sirius so much. I love the whole plot of 3, and also it just feels so different from all of the other books in the series. I feel like 3 had its own vibe that I just loved when I read it the first time, and then I kept rereading it because I loved it so much.
I loved it I love it better.
Yeah.
And I think 5, like, I do understand where people come from. I do think parts of 5 can drag. I think
It
one of the
can.
reasons I love 5 so much is that I actually think of the whole series, it has individually my favorite chapters, because that was the book a lot as a kid, or I guess as a teen. It didn't come out till I was like 15.
Yeah.
As a teen that I reread the most when I was having a bad day, because I have favorite chapters.
Yeah.
Chapter 22, Hermione's Secret, book 3. That was the one I would read a bunch. And then
Mhm.
I don't know the chapter numbers, but in book 5, you have When the Weasleys Leave, which I used to know the title of. I think it's just actually Weasley's Wizard Wheezies. I think that's like maybe
I
the
think that
title of
is
it.
the title. Yeah.
And Dumbledore's Army is the other chapter. And
Yes,
those 2
so good.
chapters are like were my favorite chapters of like all fiction. So like even though that book can drag, like it
Yeah.
also has some of like the highest moments
Mhm.
that for me were just like very comforting chapters.
Yeah, I hear you. I reread Prisoner of Azkaban about 25 times in 1 year because I just kept rereading it for class reading. I would just my teacher kept saying to me, he's like, "Do you want another book?" And I was like, "Nope." And I just kept reading the same book because it was the same thing. I found it really comforting. And I never even really thought about it in terms of being a very Hermione-centric story. Looking back on it retrospectively, yeah, it obviously is very pro
It's
Hermione.
like her book, is
It
my
is.
opinion.
Yeah, it kind of is, which is interesting, and I never really thought about that, but that makes sense. Something though that you said in a live chat discussion or whatever recently that stuck with me. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," because I am making my way through the first law standalones,
Mhm.
and you were like, I think Leanna is the one that put you onto this idea first. You were like, "Oh, if you look at Best Served Cold as not being Monza's story, but Shiver's story,"
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, oh, that's
Leanna
a
told me that.
really interesting way to look at this. And that really changed my perspective of that book.
Yeah,
Which
I was
is
gonna say, if
wild.
there's one thing you can count on, I've thought too much about Harry Potter. Just like in general in life, like I have devoted like too much time. It's actually funny, like I have a list of videos I would do for my Patreon if I ever decide to do
To
it.
do one.
And one of my videos is just like a 3-hour video where I list every Harry Potter opinion I've ever had, because I don't really want that on like the actual internet, but like
Uh-huh.
maybe for patrons, if they wanted to hear a 3-hour video of like every opinion I've ever possessed in like my 33 years of life. Well, I read it when I was like 9 or 10. So I guess in my 23 years of
Of
Harry
reading
Potter
Harry Potter.
fandom, every opinion I've ever had. So
I would love that kind of video, but also want to be like engaging with you during that video.
well, I
I
think
feel
I
like
would do it as a live because I know people would have to talk about it. That's why it would be 3 hours. So I
Mhm,
feel like I have like 20 talking points, and then we'd have to like come to a
talk it out.
consensus as a group.
Mhm. That's so funny, but I love that idea, and you should definitely do it if you decide to do a Patreon at some point in
Yeah,
time.
I if I do it, I'll do it next year when both my kids are in full-time school, like in
Yeah, that makes
elementary
sense.
school. Then I'll feel like I have time to think about it. It won't happen before then. No way.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, we were talking about that too.
Yeah, no, whenever I see people with Patreons, I'm like, "How?" I
Right
love
now,
this for you.
Patreon would be like, well, if you want to pay me to do absolutely nothing for you, go ahead.
If you wanna
I
drop
won't
me
give you
a
anything.
line, I might read it, I might not. Cool, thanks for being here, guys.
I mean, in fairness, I have paid to Patreons like that,
Mhm.
where I just
Yeah.
was like, well, I want you to keep doing this, and I don't think you will if you don't get paid, so I will pay you. But
I yeah, I
yeah.
hear you.
Oh, I like this idea, Orlando, a 24-hour Harry Potter stream.
Oh, that would be commitment. You
I
could, like,
probably
sub
need
people
24
in.
hours.
If you get someone in all these different time zones and you do, like, 3 hours each,
Yes.
then you can just have it all day long.
And it just keeps going. Anyway,
Exactly. The gift that keeps on
yeah.
giving, but it's okay. So, has the Cosmere supplanted Harry Potter as your favorite series of all time? Or, like, the Cosmere being a series, basically, or a specific series within the Cosmere, AKA Mistborn or Stormlight?
I actually always put them in different categories because
Age
I think
grouping?
Harry Potter will technically always be my favorite series. Like it was so formative.
Yeah.
Like you know, I know there's like a lot of controversy with J.K. Rowling, and I've talked about like, you know, I just don't agree with what she said, but it's always funny
Yeah.
to me when people are like, you should never read it again. And it's like, that's so easy for someone to say who like, okay, you go give up one of the most formative like things of your
Yeah.
child. Like it's so easy to say when it's not something that like influenced you. Like if you met someone from my childhood, there's like that is the first thing they would mention. Like it
Yeah.
was literally a core part of my identity
I hear
was
you.
like Harry Potter, and it still is in a lot of ways because it
Oh,
just
yeah.
can never not be. And like it just is. It is like a
I hear you.
fundamental, like as silly as that sounds, it is literally a fundamental part.
I feel very similarly,
I
honestly,
think a
like,
lot of people in our generation did. Like I think
they
if you
did,
didn't live
yeah.
through it,
It's
you just
different, yeah.
you can't
If you
understand
were
it.
that age where you aged with the characters and you went to the midnight events and releases and all that stuff, I mean, that's even if you can disconnect yourself from the material, those events themselves are still core memories to you.
Yeah, and I
So
think people also don't realize like I've talked about this actually on my channel, being like it's really unique because there aren't series that grow with you. Like there were so many series I aged out of, like Secrets of Droon,
yeah.
Jack and Annie Magic Tree House, because they stayed the same and I grew. Harry
Mhm,
grew with people. And
mhm.
now the new generation just kind of binges them and they're
Yeah,
not
it's hard.
experiencing in the way of like, okay, I was 12, Harry was 12, Harry was 15, I was 15, Harry
Right.
was 17, I was 17. And that's like a very unique experience that I will never experience again. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, long story short, Harry Potter is like I always say it's like in a different category.
Sure.
It is just like it is there, it is there. I definitely consider Sanderson in general to be my favorite author, like as an adult.
Mhm.
So you know, when people ask me my favorite book, I usually say Warbreaker.
And
It's
you and
kind of
I
like,
are of the minority in that. I feel like where
no.
when we talk about our Cosmere books, I'm like, Warbreaker.
It is, it's amazing.
So good. I love Warbreaker so much. Kyle and I are going to be
I'm just
doing a chat
so
about it in like a week and a half. I can't remember what the day it is, but because we just reread it. I reread it twice, or I read it twice in less than a year period because I liked it so
I
much.
appreciated that though. I was like, that is the proper way to experience Warbreaker. Warbreaker is like a book. Zach always makes fun of me because I'm like this with Harry Potter, which I don't like to say online how many times I've read that series because it's like actually embarrassing. But like I'll read Harry Potter and he's like, why are you say you can't put the book down? You could recite it to me. He's like, you could recite this book to me and it's like still, and I feel that way about
Yeah.
Warbreaker. Like I've read it 3 times and it's
Mhm.
still like anxiety inducing at the
I
end.
know. I love it. And I feel like I will probably reread it once a year. It's just I feel like every January I'm probably gonna start my
I
year
love
with
that idea.
Warbreaker. Because it has some of the best Cosmere characters. Light Song and Nightblood are two of the best. They're just so, so good.
It's so
Confirmed.
funny because I don't think any of the characters in that book, other than Nightblood, make like my top characters. Yeah, Zach knows. Zach knows.
You don't think
But
anyone other than Nightblood makes your top characters?
yeah, like when I did my ranking, like but they're all good. Like they're
Mhm.
all high, but none of them are my absolute favorites.
Mhm.
But I think it's like the only romance I like in a Sanderson.
Yep.
I love that it's a sister story. Like there's
Mhm.
just all the elements are perfect.
Yeah, it's so good. So Light Song for me was my hero of that book when I read it the first time because everyone kept saying they were like, Sanderson's humor is really wonky, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I don't know what people are talking about. This book is hilarious. I thought it was so funny, but also it's so interesting in the way that it reads compared to all of his other books. I was like, you can tell when he's written a book for Emily. Like it's so obvious, which I think is hilarious and I love it so much.
Yeah, Emily's the real MVP. I'm like, "Oh, all the stuff he writes for you is really good." So great,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
she's extremely nice.
She seems very nice, but you actually got to meet her, so that's
Yeah, I
pretty
mean, I
great as well.
didn't think she wasn't gonna be nice, but, like, it was more like, she was so involved, I think was the thing, like, she wanted to be the one to give us the tour.
Oh,
Like,
nice.
and I'm like, "Don't you have better things to do than, like, greet the random YouTubers that are like,
No.
and give us a full tour?" Um And, like, you can tell that she is definitely like the perfect person to like rein Brandon in, like
Yeah.
to the business side of things. Like I can tell she's like the one who's like, well, there's a deadline, Brandon. So that keeps
Keeping
the
him
sense like
grounded. Yeah, I love that though, because they do, whenever you watch interviews with the two of them, I'm like, oh, this seems like a very yin yang
yeah.
situation.
And
Which,
you just gotta wonder, like, I talk to Zach about this all the time. Like, she's marrying because they got married when only Elantris, I think, had been picked up,
I think so, yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah.
And you got to think like to marry somebody when they have a single book published in
That,
like such a volatile career path, like
yeah,
that could be the only book that ever sold,
ever gets published, yeah.
that ever is successful. And then
Mhm.
to be here now and to have been through all that is just wild to me. It's always so fascinating.
Yeah, I love it, and it was so weird getting into Sanderson last year. Like, I kept texting you whenever I would be at like a key moment in a story, and I was like, "This is happening right now." Like, I just didn't know.
Paladin!
Oh,
The duel!
oh my gosh, the duel was so ridiculous because Josh has read now one Sanderson. I got him to read one, and he has to read two more by the time that we go to Dragonsteel this year.
You can do
And
it.
yeah, well, we made an agreement that I'm learning chess and he is reading 3 Sanderson stories that initially I was like, well, I want you to read Stormlight Archive. And he's like, that's
Right.
not going to happen. So I was like, okay, well, so I chose Elantris, Warbreaker, and Emperor Soul because I was like,
Choosing
I feel like,
Elantris is such a choice, Laura. Why didn't we talk about this? I don't
so
agree.
here's the thing. I wanted him to read it to see how different his writing has changed as he reads
Okay.
other stuff, because I was like, if you enjoy this, then you will likely enjoy the stuff that comes later.
Okay,
And
that's fair.
he did enjoy most of Elantris, but he hated the ending, which I agreed with because the ending is way too fast in Elantris. And I was like,
It's
fair.
super rushed.
Super, super rushed. So he's gonna read Warbreaker, and then I was like, because Warbreaker is my favorite, so he wanted to read that one. Then I was like, and Emperor Soul is just perfect. So I was like, read Emperor Soul. It's a great novella, and he hasn't read many novellas, so it's like I feel like this will kind of fit in well with his repertoire of stuff that you can pick from. And then if you like these, we can
Move on.
delve into the Stormlight Archive, maybe. But when I was reading Words of Radiance, like, and I got to the duel scene, which I'm not going to spoil for anybody. It's a
No, you can't
fiery
talk about
moment.
it.
Can't talk about it. I freaked out because I was like, I need to talk to someone right now in front of my
It's
face.
not something that you can read in isolation. Like
No,
you immediately have to be like, who can
exactly.
talk to me?
Exactly. And he was playing World of Warcraft, and I went and I sat in front of him and just yammered at him for 30 straight minutes of everything that just happened. And he was like, that sounds great. I'm really glad that you liked it. And I was like, oh my
I
God, give
didn't
me
like
something
it.
here. Like, give me something.
You know, it's so funny because our friend who was like reading through that series, her husband had read it and me and Zach had read it, like it. So we had all read it and only she hadn't. And we were like, oh my gosh, one of the best scenes in all of the series happens in Word of Radiance. It's the duel scene. We can't wait till you get there. So
Yeah.
she gets there and she texts me after and she goes, you said this was one of the best scenes you've ever read, like that you've ever read. What are you talking about? This was horrible. Everything about this was horrible from beginning to end. I'm so stressed. I feel so embarrassed. I was like, well, okay, yeah, but like that's why it's great.
It's so good.
It's a roller coaster. Okay, we can't say any more because it'll be spoiler, but it's a roller coaster of emotions that makes it so
it takes
good.
you on a journey. It is a journey before destination, very much in that moment. But
journey before destination.
I remember when I texted you, I was like, I'm starting Words of Radiance because I didn't have the best experience with Way of Kings. And I was like, I'm jumping back in. I'm going to do it. And you were like, you have these moments to look forward to. They mean nothing because you don't have the context. Go. And I was like, okay. So then when I got
I think I said duel scene, chasm scene, end scene.
The end. And the end, you said, I think.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, I was like, this has got to be the duel scene. Like when I got to it, I was like, this has got to be it. And I was like, this is it. Like there's no question.
No question.
Yeah, it's so good. But oh man, so I'm now fully hooked in Starlight Archive,
I know, and
and
I'm
I
so
blame
excited
you.
you guys are gonna come to Dragonsteel. It's gonna
Yes,
be a freaking party this year.
yeah. It's gonna be my first time like being a vast distance away from my child, which you're gonna have to
I
amp
already
me up for
told you
that
I'll give you
before
a
we go.
support group. You know what?
So
This is very relevant to our conversation because the first time Zach ever got me to leave our son because he felt like it would be good for me,
mhm.
because he just felt like I needed to just do it and be away for a couple nights. He bribed me by taking me to Harry Potter Land. He said, I feel like the only way I would get you to leave our son is if I just took you to Florida and we went to Harry Potter Land. So that's what he did. He took me there just like as a full adult. Like
That's
that was my
awesome.
present. Was
I
to
went there
go
for my
to
29th birthday, so I have no judgments.
Exactly. And it's
Uh,
funny because when we were there, we didn't buy like a robe or a wand. And I remember saying to my husband, I was like, I just want to let you know we're going to come back when our son is older. And then I'm going to literally buy everything. And like, that is what I'm going to do. And luckily, he is a huge Harry Potter fan.
and a
So
Hufflepuff.
already, like, he's asked for his 11th birthday, we're going to go to Harry
Oh,
Potter
nice.
World. So
And you're
that's
gonna go
like
to the
our
Florida
plan.
one?
We're gonna go to Florida. Yeah,
Okay.
because it's bigger. So we're
You
gonna
can
go to
see
Florida.
Alan.
Well, there's a lot of booktubers over there that we can go
Yeah,
hang
there
out
are.
with. But
Mhm.
yeah, we're gonna go there for his 11th birthday and let him take the sorting test. And then like I told him, I was
Aw.
like, will literally buy you anything. Like if
Yeah,
we go there and you're like, I want this, I'll be like, great. Which is not the
cool.
kind of parent I am, I should say. I'm like the opposite. I'm like, I won't buy you anything. It's like my weakness.
Mhm.
I will
Yeah,
live
I
for
had
you.
so much fun. I definitely got the wand when I was there, but I had taken my wand from my Pottermore test, and that's the wand I bought specifically. I was like, I
I love
want that
that.
wand.
Maybe I
So,
should do that too. Don't give me
yes,
ideas. It's not like we
you
need more
should
wands. Like I have lots of
definitely
wands.
do that.
Just
It's
I didn't buy
so
one there.
great.
I have
I
I
wanted
have
to buy
wands.
one because, like, I kept seeing people buying other people's wands, and I'm like, "Those don't belong to you." You know,
They're
it's
not
like,
yours.
"They're not yours. They're not gonna work properly, guys. Come on." So, yeah, I loved it. It was super, super fun. I had a great time. But you
Yeah,
guys
I
will
mean, it
too.
was a great. That's the thing. You just get to live out your fantasy, and now I get to do it again. Like this is the only time. Like I don't usually agree with parents living through their children. I shall be doing it though, and that's just this one time.
That's funny. I feel that way about Harry Potter that I'm excited to get to experience that with her when she's older. I'm like, oh yeah, it's because we're never gonna read it again for the first time. And that magic you can see them experiencing. And that's a really
It
cool
is.
thing.
It is one of the things. Like yeah, I know everyone talks about how hard parenting is. Like I get it, and it is. It is. I feel like we don't talk enough about like positive things a lot of times. Like I think it's just gotten so
Mhm.
negative, which I understand because of anyway, we don't need to get into all that. But like literally one of the highlights of my life has been reading Harry Potter with my son because
Mhm.
experiencing it for the first it's like you get to experience it for the first time again.
Yeah.
And all the things, Star Wars, um, like getting to do that is
Mhm.
like top tier
Mhm.
experience. And
Yep.
you know, just like having someone like a mini me who can like go head to head in Harry Potter trivia, so rewarding. Like it it's like great. I'm so glad he decided to cooperate because you don't
Mhm.
really get to choose. So
Yeah.
luckily he
I'm very
decided.
I'm happy you're here for this because there was no option.
That is like yeah, so like now and like now his sister, it's like a little less pressure on her because I got the one. So now like I hope
Exactly.
she does, but if
Yeah,
she doesn't, it's like okay, it's fine.
that's funny. We my husband and I talk about this as one of our core memories. I had to have a C-section with my daughter, so we were stuck in the hospital for like 5 days. And it was, I think, on her third day of being alive, and it was like 9:30 at night. I was starving. I was like, "Can we order food to the hospital? Can we do that?" So we ordered a bunch of pad thai, and Return of the Jedi was on, and that was
Amazing.
like our first family meal. It was like we were eating pad thai in the hospital while watching Return of the Jedi with our 3-day-old. I was like, this is fine.
It's perfect. That's like the
Yeah,
perfect what else are you gonna do?
it was great. I loved it. And I was like, well, you're heading home and you've already seen Star Wars. check that off the list.
Check it off the list. You know, I have a lot of memories because I actually, when I read the book of Sanderson, was after having my son.
Mm.
So we had a really horrible nursing journey. So I was up a lot and I was watching a ton of TV. And at some point, you just get like, all I do is watch TV because I'm stuck on this couch. And so I started reading actually the Stormlight Archive
As one
like
does.
on my phone.
Gosh, that's
And
even worse.
because like I mean, you
hear you.
get it. Like you just like, you can't hold an iPad, you can't hold a book. It's just
Yep.
the optics of the situation. So, and so I have like so many fond memories because I one time in particular, I can't remember where it was in Words of Radiance, but I know it was Words of Radiance where it was 3 a.m. and my son had fallen asleep and I was still reading. And I was like, I have to go to bed. Like it is 3 a.m.
Yeah,
and
I
he is
need
going to
sleep.
be up in 2 hours. Like, put the book away. This is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I
Turn it
hear you.
off. Go to bed.
It's still so nice when you get engrossed in a story like that. I love that when that happens. And that definitely this past year was Stormlight for me. I was like, oh, I just am completely in this until I finish. Like I don't know how to stop, especially Words of Radiance. I just
Generally,
could
I
not
don't want you
put it
to
down.
say it online necessarily, but generally, how old is your daughter? Did you start it right after? I can't remember. You started right after she was born. Or Sanderson.
She's 20 months. So I started Mistborn when she was 6 months old.
Okay, I was like,
And then,
I thought she was pretty young, so you kind of have the same thing, same age that
yeah,
you were.
I have a photo of her and I on Christmas Day because she would only contact nap for a really long time. And she's
So
like
fun.
plastered on me and I'm holding Mistborn like this. And that was how I spent our first Christmas.
And did you ever drop it on yourself?
I didn't. So
Oh, you didn't? I did.
yeah.
I read
Mistborn's
books
small.
that way and fell and just right on my head.
Mistborn's pretty small though, so it was okay. But I didn't even bother trying to do that with any of the Stormlight Archive books because they're so big that I ended up reading most of them via ebook because that way I was like,
mean,
oh,
that's
I
what
can
I
put it
did.
on my laptop. So yeah, it
So I
was
did on the
a lot
phone, but same day.
exactly. So much easier. But Words of Radiance is your favorite Stormlight book, correct?
Yeah.
I think
And
so.
that in this case, I am the basic. Like that is the basic opinion, but it is just
Because
the
it's
opinion.
so good. It's just so good.
So good.
I mean, you can't really be all that upset about it. And you, I think, like me, Trust was your favorite of the secret projects. I haven't read Sunlit Man yet. I started it, but it wasn't super vibing with it. So I'll get back to it
Yeah,
eventually.
I didn't super vibe with Sunlight. I would say Tress and Yumi are really close, like really, really
Okay.
close. I do think in a lot of ways Tress might beat it out just from like my overall now connection to the book.
Yeah.
I'm not, I feel very,
It's
very,
special.
it's special now. But I do think it would still beat out Yumi just slightly just because of some of the stuff I didn't like in Yumi. But both of those were like 4.5 for me.
Okay.
And then Sunlit, I ended up giving it a 4, I think. It probably hovered between a 3.5 and a 4 for me. If it wasn't for the Stormlight connection, I think it would have been lower.
Okay.
So I know Sunlit is some people's favorite. It just like didn't do a ton for me.
I saw a few people when the reviews started coming in on YouTube, they were like, new Cosmere favorite. And I was like, really? Okay. And not
it'll be
everybody.
interesting when you finish it. We can have a discussion when you finish it about why I had an issue with it. I don't want to say it because I feel like if I do, it'll color how you read the story. So
yeah,
I want you to read it and then I can give the opinion.
I'm debating when I'm gonna jump back in because I'm in the middle of 2 books right now, and I'm like, okay, I need to finish these before I start picking up more books because I'm getting into a bad habit of that. Where I'm just picking up like 4 books at a time, and I'm like, fine. I'm like, it's not fine. Slow down.
I feel like a lot of readers do that. My sister is always like, she's been a huge reader her whole life too. She's always like, I swear, in the middle of like 8 books. I'm the opposite. I am a 1 book at a time person. If it's a different format, I might be reading 2. So I might, like, if I'm listening to an audiobook, I'll have a physical and an audio, but I don't do audio a ton anyway, so it's rare.
Mm-hmm. That's generally how I was. I was like, okay, I can do only 1 of each. And
Yeah.
I've pretty much stuck to that until recently. The two that I have right now are both audiobooks, but then I went and I downloaded the ebook for Lies of Locke Lamora today. I was like, I'm gonna do that one and jump between that and the audiobook. And then I'm in Red Country as well. And I'm only doing the audiobooks for that because Stephen Pacey is just so good that I'm like,
He's great.
I don't need to read them because Stephen Pacey will read them to me.
Yeah. Stephen Pacey is like the only audiobook narrator other than Neil Gaiman, who's converted me.
Oh my gosh.
The only two audiobooks
Yeah.
that I like.
Neil's voice is so sultry and just like almost puts me to sleep. I'm like, it's so nice.
It's funny because I read everything in his voice now, though. Like I've only read like a couple of his books, audiobook, most of them I've done physical. But now it's like every book I read, I hear it. Like even in the picture books, I like find myself hearing his voice as I read them. And a lot of them, like Blueberry Girl in particular, which is like very Neil Gaiman coded. Same with Cinnamon. I don't know if you've read Cinnamon, but that one is also very
wild. But yeah,
Gaiman coded.
Oh, Neil, so many good ones. Yeah. But
he's great.
You were saying you were watching a lot of TV when you were in your nursing journey initially, which I love TV, but I find this funny because I've heard you say a lot of the time, you're like, I don't watch a ton of TV, but then I have found TV shows through you. So I'm like,
I mean, I used to watch a lot more TV, I feel like. So I've watched a lot of stuff. I think what happens now is like I rarely watch new TV. I feel like I rewatch a lot of old favorites, but also I think like my Booktube has taken a lot of the free time, and then the other free time, like I'd rather be reading or playing video games. And I used to just read and play video games and watch TV, and like that was my least favorite of them. So that got cut out in the last like 4 years. But I watched so much TV, like not to get like too personal, but like the nursing thing, it just was horrible, and I had to time it and keep him awake on each side, and then I had to pump after and then feed what I pumped.
I did the same. It was real fun.
Okay, great. So fun. It was so great. Ended up finding out that I have a genetic thing that I can't nurse, but it was 3 months of a lot of misery and hours. So I watched a lot of like comedies. That's how I watched all of Parks and Rec for the first time.
Yep.
All 7 seasons. All 7 seasons. What else did I watch? During that time, I watched all of the Mindy Project.
Fair.
I don't know if you've seen that.
I have.
First season, great. Second season, fine. Every other season, extremely mediocre.
Correct.
Extremely mediocre to bad.
100% correct in your assessment. Yeah, that was very much how I felt about that show. I was like, oh, we're starting out pretty well here because I loved her in The Office so much. Like, I love The Office. And I was like, okay, great. And then after season 2, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But the thing was like, it was like 20-minute shows. So you can time it. Like the 20-minute is like the perfect timing. And like lighthearted, funny, not dramatic. Like that was the rule.
Yeah. I hear you. Mine became What We Do in the Shadows because I
need to watch that.
It's so funny. The first
like
season
8 million people have told me I'd find it funny, and it's just like one of those things I've never gotten around to.
It takes Josh is not a super TV person. He just never has been. Like he had never watched a Disney movie until we were together.
Zach watches all the TV. Zach watches like, he knows everything.
I don't get it for Josh. Like, I just don't because we are so polar opposite in that regard where I'm like, Zach, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Here's the list of all the things. And Josh is like, I've heard of maybe one. And I'm like, cool, we're going to watch all of them.
What we used to do. Sorry, no, you finished what you watched. You watched What We Do in the Shadows.
You watched What We Do in the Shadows. And then you had posted something about Mythic Quest. And I was like, what is this show? And I messaged you and I was like, what is this? And then we watched the first episode and like pissed ourselves. I was like, okay, we're watching this whole thing now. So my kid was like 2 months old and I was trying to rock her while we had Mission Quest.
Mythic Quest, it definitely goes up and down. Like some episodes are literally so funny.
So funny.
And it definitely like struggles in later seasons, but it's still worth the watch, I feel like. Did you feel like it was worth it?
Season 1 as a whole is amazing. Oh my gosh. So good because Josh and I met playing World of Warcraft, and there is an episode that
and Mythic is basically World of Warcraft.
Basically World of Warcraft, which was amazing. And then there is one episode that they lifted an actual thing that happened in World of Warcraft. It's dinner party, like that.
Oh, that actually happened. That's
that actually happened. So it wasn't Nazi based, but what it was that there's two factions. There's Horde and Alliance, and a person that played for one of the factions died in real life. So their faction decided to hold an in-game funeral for them, and the other faction planned a raid and went and slaughtered all of these players at this funeral. And it's one of the funniest things on the internet for gaming ever. It's absolutely hilarious. And they took that whole thing right from World of Warcraft. So when we were watching, the first episode that we lost it with was the casino, the masked man in the casino. We thought was so hilarious. Funny. So funny. But like, I was so hooked with Dinner Party because of the fact that I was like, oh, there's a very clear wow.
Zach and I still sometimes say Blood Ocean to
Blood
each
Ocean?
Other. Blood Ocean. What does that mean? I don't know. Blood Ocean.
Blood Ocean. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So hard.
Oh my gosh. We quote that at each other, right? Like stuff regularly from he's the man that lives at a casino. Like that's probably the one that we quote more than anything else. But yeah, so I laugh whenever I'm like, she did introduce me to some TV shows, even though she thinks that like, she doesn't watch.
I mean, I feel very strongly about the TV I do watch is what ends up happening. Because if I sit to watch a TV show, like obviously I feel super strongly about Community. I've watched Community like 4 times. In fact, when I was puking my brains out like a month ago, I get really, really bad anxiety attacks because I usually don't puke. I have a lot of health. I have anxiety in general. So, and so I put Community on and I watched like 30 episodes of Community. Just I was like, what can I put on? I'm like puking in the bathroom. Community's on. I was like, what's happening in here? And I'm just like,
oh my gosh,
it just feels good.
I'm that way with Ted Lasso. I love Ted Lasso so much.
Ted Lasso was so good. Can we
have it on
without spoilers? Were you disappointed by the finale of Ted Lasso?
For one specific character, yes. Yes, I was.
Which character was that?
Ted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We can talk about that off screen.
We'll talk about it off screen.
Yeah, but
I was not happy with how Keely's storyline ended.
Fair. That's fair. Yeah.
But the first season of Ted Lasso was like some of the best TV made.
Oh yeah. And we love there's 3 episodes as an arc in season 2 that we really love. It's the Christmas episode, Rainbow, and The Signal. It's these 3 episodes back to back that are all so good.
Season 2 definitely like is good. I don't think as a whole it's as good as season 1, but it still had so much good stuff in it.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. Like season 1 is just like such good TV.
It's
like
so
it's
good.
Pretty hard to beat.
it. Yeah, exactly. Do you have a favorite character from Ted?
Oh, absolutely, Roy.
I am married to Roy Kent. Josh is 1000% Roy Kent. I watched the first episode with him and I was like, oh.
Roy Kent is just, he's got my heart. I
love him so much. Him and Trent Krim are my 2.
Oh, Trent Krim. I actually have a shirt that says Trent Krim. Independent.
Oh, amazing.
I'm gonna worn it. I haven't worn that in a while, actually. I'll have to pull it back out.
I love Trent as well, but I love Ted Lasso in general. I am very much a comedy person. Like I'm not super. I love a period drama. That's generally the only time that I'll super get into it, but that's because I'm a history nerd, so I like to get into that. But comedies are really for me where it's at, which I have noticed now that I'm reading more fantasy. I'm like, oh, I like fantasy that has comedic elements in it as well. Like I just appreciate comedy and satire when it's done really well, which has been nice because I found Joe Abercrombie last year and I'm like, man, is perfection with its craft.
I like drama sometimes. It just depends. I mean, like I obviously am a huge Stranger Things fan. I really like One Piece. That's not a drama. That's like a comedy, but it's like long. The one thing about comedies is that they're 20 minutes, which I think is what often gets me to watch them.
Yeah.
But I guess Ted Lasso was like 40 minutes, but most of the dramas I've seen, this is actually something that like Zach has been annoyed for like the full 12 years of our marriage about, which is he would watch a TV show and I would catch enough of it, like in the back, like I'd be doing my own thing. And then it gets to a point where all of a sudden I want to ask a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And so I'd be like, oh, what's going on? Like, what's happening with this character? Oh, can you explain? Like, I actually did this recently. And he's like, oh, you can sit and watch it. I'm not going to keep just like answering, like either watch it or not. So there's actually a decent number of shows. Yes.
Agreed, Jerry.
There's a decent number of shows where like I have only watched season 2 onward because like
really?
I just like eventually got sucked in because Zach was watching it in the background so much.
Okay, we need specifics.
Okay. Breaking Bad. Like, let me tell you about Breaking Bad. So we watched like episode 1 of Breaking Bad and the people fall through the roof, like the bathtub. And I was like, we both were like disgusting.
Yep.
So I didn't watch anymore. And then like a couple years later, Zach's like, I kind of want to try again because everyone says it's really good. So he watched like all of season 1 and I would get bits and pieces. And by like the end of season 1, I was like, I had seen enough to be like, oh, well, what's going on here and here and here? And Zach was like, do you want me to unplug my headphones? Because I'd be like watching like silently and be like, what's happening? He's like, what? So then I actually ended up getting super into Breaking Bad, but I actually don't think I've seen every episode because I literally just think Zach explained it to me and then I got hooked around season 2.
Funny. Oh, man,
and watched every episode. Vampire Diaries. Zach watched like all the Vampire Diaries by himself. Somewhere around season 2, I got interested enough. And then we only watched 3 seasons of that. And I think then we fell off. But like, I've only watched season 2 and 3. He explained to me.
It gets real bad after that, so no worries.
Merlin, I went back and I watched Merlin. I went back and watched the beginning.
This is because I liked Merlin.
Yes, the BBC Merlin because I liked it so much. I was like, okay, I actually want to go back and like rewatch what I missed. But that I started that at like season 2 as well. There's more shows. Nashville.
That makes sense now that I know he plays like a ton of instruments and is very musical for him to watch that show.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll just like try anything. Like he'll just be like, well, we'll try it. There's a show he's watching like called The Morning Show right now.
Yep, that's on Apple
I have
TV.
not seen a single full episode of that. I've seen like maybe 40 minutes on total, but I could tell you a lot about it because I've asked him a bunch of questions.
That was another postpartum show for me. I was just stuck in a chair and I was like, okay, what's next?
I'm so excited when like Wheel of Time or even like Rings of Power because he's like, look, a show you'll sit down and watch. He just always wants me to watch TV with him and I just never will. So he's like, finally. So he's happy I like One Piece. He was happy to watch Yu Yu Hakusho with me because it was something to watch that I would sit down and actually pay attention to.
Yeah. So this is like tangentially related, but sort of not. So I love Sailor Moon.
I loved Sailor Moon growing up, and I love. You kind of convinced me. I kind of want to go back and read the manga anyway.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, you commented on one of the books that I posted. So I had a very particular relationship to Sailor Moon as a child, in the sense that I was like, she's super annoying, but I am very much this Sailor Scout. So did you have that same thing where you were like, oh, I'm that one, or it wasn't really that way?
I definitely did. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right one because I actually haven't watched it again since I was a kid. I'm pretty sure it was Sailor Jupiter.
That was mine too.
It wasn't? Yes, it's about Sailor Jupiter. I just looked it up. I was right. It was Sailor Jupiter.
Yeah, that was mine too. I was like, first of all, she's got appropriately brown hair. And she liked food a lot. And I was like, this is speaking my language.
It's all about Sailor Jupiter. I don't know how else to say it. She is the moment. She is the moment.
I was very curious when you commented on it. I was like, oh, I wonder if she's like also a Sailor Jupiter stan.
I'm a Sailor Jupiter. It was kind of funny because like with Yu Yu Hakusho as well, it was like I watched Sailor Moon younger. Yu Yu Hakusho was like a little later. But it's funny because like it was like my favorite TV show. I loved it so much, but I also haven't seen it since I was like 12. So it was like, it was actually such a great experience to watch the live action because I had no specific, like I didn't have a lot of specific memories, just vibes, which I think is the best way to go into a live action because it was like, oh, I mean, I kept looking stuff up because I told Zach, I was like, I think this is covering a lot of ground. And I did look up and it was like, oh, I was correct. It was 40 episodes.
Oh, okay.
Like that.
A lot.
Well, this like basically 2 episodes covered 40 episodes of the manga, the
Wow.
anime. But if you remember, Sailor Moon felt less this way, but like that's how the animes were. They were
Mhm.
so weekly back then
Yeah.
that things happened really slowly because also it was very unlikely you were going to get to watch all of them. So I feel
Yeah.
like they were very repetitive purposely because you wouldn't have to see them all to know what
Yeah.
was going on.
So, do you remember which version you watched? Because I didn't realize this until a month ago that I grew up watching the DIC dubbed version.
Oh, I don't know.
And
There's 2 versions?
so there is the original Japanese version, then there is a dubbed
That makes
version
sense.
of the Japanese version, and then
Okay.
there's the DIC version. So in the
And is
DIC
that just an
version,
English language version?
no, people have different names. So
Oh.
Sailor Moon's name in the version I grew up with was Serena. And it's not Usagi the same way that it is in the other ones.
Okay, it was
So
definitely Serena. I watched whatever
yeah,
that was because her name was
that's the
Serena.
one I watched too. And I scoured the internet. I was like, okay, where can I watch it online? And it's not there unless you go into the
Wait,
National
what's her name
Archive.
now?
So I someone on eBay is
This is
selling these
upsetting.
DVDs.
I feel
I
like you're
know.
telling me news that's
So,
upsetting.
well, see, here's the thing. I found someone on eBay that sells the DVDs and they are legit. And I ordered them and I've been rewatching the version I grew up with, and it's amazing.
Wait, I have to what's her name though now?
So in the original and in the manga and in the original anime, it's Usagi.
Oh.
And for some reason, and then this like American adaptation, they decided her name was Serena. And I was like,
Well,
okay.
her name is Serena. I hate to tell
Exactly.
everybody.
It's Serena. I was so confused because I saw it was on Hulu and I was like, oh, great. Like, I'm going to watch it here. And they were like, Usagi. And I was like, who is this? Like, what? I was like, this is not.
Did you
No,
watch
no.
it on Cartoon Network?
I don't remember.
Because I feel like I watched it on Adult Swim, Cartoon Network. Is usually where I watch most of my anime. I for sure watched on Adult Swim Yu Yu Hakusho and Dot Hack Sign, but I'm not actually sure where I watched Sailor Moon because I watched it a little younger. So I
So,
wonder.
no. And the reason is because here's a fun little bootlegging story of my family. So I grew up in Canada where we didn't have Cartoon Network. And when Sailor Moon was airing, we had basic cable and we watched it on some channel that came in through basic cable. But then my dad found this system that like if you got these specific satellite cards, you could access all these American channels.
Amazing.
So we were doing that after. I think I was like 8 or 9 when we got that. And then we got Cartoon Network and that was where I watched Dragon Ball Z.
Okay, Dragon Ball Z was definitely on Cartoon Network.
Yeah. So, but that was the first anime I think I saw other than Sailor Moon. And I know for sure that one was on Cartoon Network, but I don't recall what Sailor Moon was on. But either way, the
Did you ever
DVDs
watch
are on eBay.
Teen Titans then?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, that was around that time. It's like that was all there. You know what I mean?
Oh,
That
yeah.
was the Cartoon Network.
The Cartoon Network lineup was pretty solid for like a few years.
It was pretty great.
Yeah. And then I loved the ABC Saturday morning cartoons or Disney's One Saturday Morning or whatever it was.
I probably watched those.
Recess
Disney,
was like the big show.
What was the show?
Recess? Did you see that one growing up?
You know, I never watched Recess. Like I watched a few episodes. It just like I just never connected to Recess. I would say like most of my Disney memories are from when I'm a little older, like the Disney original movies. Like I have seen like 75% of the Disney original movies.
Yep.
And have rewatched them as adults.
Cadet Kelly still lives in my brain.
You know what? Cadet Kelly wasn't favorite. For me, it was more about motocross. I watched motocross as an adult just for fun.
So good.
So good. Still hits. Halloween Town.
I watch Halloween Town every year.
We watch it with our kids now every year.
Amazing. So good.
So good. This is like one of my Luck of the Irish. You know, that was one of Zach's faves too. We can't wait to show these to our kids. They're all on. I brought this into a YouTube video. Pitch Perfect. No, Pixel Perfect. Pixel Perfect.
Yeah, Pixel Perfect. I was like, Pitch Perfect, very big movie.
That's a very big movie. No, Pixel Perfect, which no one's heard of. That's very different. Very different. Yeah, That's more my Disney memories. Like, I'm sure I did watch Disney cartoons. I just don't
Mhm.
really remember them as much.
Yeah, I loved the Disney original movies, and then like the Friday night lineup that they had,
Tell me
which
what was on
TGI
it.
it was the TGIF lineup. So they had like Boy Meets World at that point, and then
Oh,
they had
and the Boy Meets
the
World.
Olsen twins had a show for like a year.
I don't remember that one.
um,
We watched a ton of Boy Meets World for sure.
mhm.
And, I was gonna say I definitely watched some what was Hilary Duff's show?
Lizzie McGuire.
Definitely watched Lizzie McGuire, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure. Gosh, there's definitely I watched a lot of Disney Channel, so I'm like, there
same.
must have been more.
Right?
I just can't remember what those are like the ones I remember the most.
Mhm.
I don't oh man. It was
It'll
good
come to you.
times.
Yeah,
That was the time to
exactly.
be alive.
Yes, so, so good. But
Disney Channel
we haven't
cartoons.
really talked about your new era that you're in right now,
My new
other
era.
than
Yep.
yeah, other than, Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So you're kinda thriving in A Song of Ice and Fire right now, which I'm so excited for you.
It is. It's so funny to me to be in our year of 2024, and I'm like, "You guys, have you heard? A Song of Ice and Fire is so great. It's so crazy." Er
Oh my gosh, yeah,
it's
our
never
best
getting less funny to me.
no, I laugh every time I look so here's the thing, Kyle messaged me when you started before you started Storm of Swords, and he was like, "This is what she thinks the Red Wedding is," and I about lost it in the text chat. I was like, "I can't wait." It's like, I
It was
actively can't wait.
you know
Oh
how you
my
were
god.
talking about reading the duel scene? Like,
Mhm.
I read that scene and, like, it was, like, apocalyptic, like, I read that, it was 10:30 at night, which is already my pumpkin hour. This is
Mhm.
let me go through this whole let me set up the scene for everybody. I got in bed and it was, like, 10 PM, and I was like, "I'm gonna read 1 chapter before bed." So I read a
Mhm.
chapter, and I forget what's the chapter right before the red wedding? I'm trying to think. It's pretty innocuous. Whatever it is, it's pretty
Yeah.
innocuous. And then I turned the page and saw that it was a Catelyn chapter, and I was
Reigns of
like
Cashmere.
well, I was like, Catelyn's my favorite character, so I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna, like, this I'll just read this one super quick before bed." So
Yep.
Zach gets mad, he's, like, reading a little bit, and kinda turns off the light to go to sleep, and I read this chapter, and I'm like, I'm so upset, and I'm, like,
Mhm.
trying to tell Zach, and Zach's like, "It's 10:30." Like, I first of all, haven't read any of the series. I can't deal with, like, whatever's happening with you right
Mhm.
now. And I
Yep.
was like and so then I messaged Kyle for, like, 40 minutes. Like,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
so bad. I mean, you guys gotta see that. Like, I was like my favorite text from that, literally, I told him is, like he was like, "You need to understand that you are literally breaking down. Like, like, you are having a breakdown, and I need you to, like, understand, like, you've got to, like, pull it together,
Yeah.
like, have
Oh
a
my gosh.
breakdown." Ugh,
While you were messaging Kyle, Kyle was messaging me what you were messaging
ugh.
Kyle. Like, I got a text and it was like super late. And he's like, "It's happening." And I just started laughing. I was like, I feel so bad for her, but
He, I think,
simultaneously,
messaged a lot of people
perfect. Oh,
because I
it's
was
so
literally
good.
having a meltdown. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I literally didn't sleep all night. I
Oh,
woke up,
geez.
I felt horrible, and I was like, "Zach, I didn't sleep all night because of what I just read." Like, I didn't sleep all night. I couldn't
I
even
remember
believe
when
it.
I messaged you, you were like, "I needed to take medicine today because I didn't
I
sleep."
did,
And I was like,
I took Advil.
"Yeah."
Like, I had to take medication because I was like, it was ridiculous. And then I didn't read it for, like, 2 days.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, that was one of the rare times where, like, a spoiler I actually think made it worse
Yeah.
because the whole time I was reading, I kept being like, "Well, it's this thing that I think is gonna happen at the red wedding isn't happening, so this must not
Mhm.
be that thing." And, anyway, yeah, it was funny because he also had posted I'm trying to think of whose Discord it was. I think it might have been Alex Nieves' Discord. He posted, like, "Bookborn read The Red Wedding. Don't at her. she's still processing. But here's how she felt. And then like, I don't know, a few hours later, Jake Bishop added me and was like, I don't care. Bookborn, get in here. I don't care how you're feeling. Come tell us.
Us Canadians have gotten a really a poor representation of being very nice, when Kyle, Jake, and I were all thinking this was hilarious.
And it is, like, objectively, it's hilarious.
It is. But also horrible. So I'm sorry.
It's horrible.
Oh
And I
my
think
gosh.
it's funnier because everyone was, like, waiting for it, which I think just does make it funnier because, like, it's actually peak comedy if you think about it, because I spent 2 videos saying how Catelyn's my favorite character.
Oh, I know.
When no one else likes her.
Yeah.
I'm like full Team Stark, and then I have this whole thing about, well, the Red Wedding's been spoiled for me, and here's what it is. Like, that is, you couldn't have written better.
No.
You couldn't have written it better.
Perfection. And I think it was your Clash of Kings video, and you were like, I just have a bad feeling for Rob. And Josh walked through the room at that moment that it went on. He's like, oh, she has no idea. And I was like, it's so good.
It's like, I foreshadowed that event with like George Martin level foreshadowing. Like, it felt scripted. Like, when I go watch that Clash of Kings, like, it feels scripted. Catelyn's my favorite character. I'm kind of worried for Rob. Something seems like it's going to happen.
Yeah, it was so well timed. Honestly, all of it was so good. Oh man, I love that you're in this phase and that it's working for you, because it's so good, but it was a gift to all of us.
Yeah, it's so funny. And like, I do the ultimate end game would be if Martin decides to release the book like within the next year.
I know.
It would complete the comedy of like, I waited and got rewarded. So
exactly. So what does that teach all of you? Never read any of his stuff, clearly.
Yeah, that's made a lot of people happy. It's made a lot of people happy.
Oh my gosh. So our best friend has been reading the series since the early 2000s, I want to say. He's not like an OG reader, but he's a pretty OG reader. And before the show was coming out, he sat me down. He's like, you need to read this because I know you're going to watch it. So I need you to
read it first.
Read it. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Was in my undergrad at the time, and like, I need to get A's in my classes. Otherwise, I feel like I failed as a human being. So I just didn't do anything other than study.
You do. You do actually. Like, if you don't get A's, then you lose life. So
like,
okay.
I don't function at that point. Shuts down on herself. So I remember the premiere happened and was like, okay, I'm gonna tune in. I hadn't read the book yet and was like, all right. Was so gripped within the prologue, basically, of what the prologue is.
Amazing.
And went out the next day, bought the book, and finished the book by the next episode. I was like, I'm in. Like, I'm so in. And at that point, had no idea that, people talked about things on the internet like books. I just assumed it was like you did research on the internet and then sent people emails about your research, and that was pretty much it. So yeah, I wish that I had known that communities talked about books online at that point in time, because when I got to the Red Wedding, I was by myself and I was what's happening? So yeah, I had a hard time.
Can't function. It's just like, that's also the funny thing, because like, you experienced it at a normal time when like other people were also experiencing it. I'm just experiencing it so late, which just like makes it really funny. It is what it is. It's been very funny. It's been fun. Very, very fun.
I agree. Tom, I think 1000% Winds of Winter.
Yeah, Sanderson's too consistent. It hasn't been long enough. Like, I think a lot of us are very excited for Wind and Truth, but it doesn't have the baggage.
Yeah. Like, can we talk about the name for a second? Like, what are your thoughts of the name Wind and Truth? Do you like it?
Neutral. Like, it's hard for me to feel very strongly about a title.
Okay.
I know people are sad that the Katek isn't working now. But like, I don't know. I don't feel like I care about any of the titles in
Sure.
the Stormlight Archive.
Mhm. It was
I do have a Song of Ice and Fire title opinions, though.
Oh, do you? Okay, we'll get to that in a second. The reason I ask is because as I was making dinner tonight, Josh was like, "What do you think would be your favorite book title ever?"
Mm,
And you don't even have to have read the book or like the book. Like, what do you
just
think
the
it would be? And
title.
yeah, and he was like, "I think mine would be Children of a Lesser God because it's just such a great
Mm,
title." And I was like, I don't really know if I would have a favorite title, but I was like, I think The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance are both great titles, like
mm,
in terms of just stuff that comes to my head immediately. And then I was like, I don't think any of the Song of Ice and Fire titles are all that great. I was like,
mm.
a Game of Thrones is probably the best of the bunch, just because I feel like it's not the most descriptive. A Clash of Kings is quite literal. But
Mm.
we then got into this conversation about titles, and then I was going through all the Stormlight Archive titles, and I was like, Wind and Truth is by far, I think, the worst of the bunch.
It's by far the
But
worst. It's
yeah.
for sure the
So,
worst, and we might feel differently about it after we read, because,
mhm,
like, Rhythm of War is so indicative of what's in the book that I really like the title, and The Way of
mhm,
Kings is the same way. I think
yeah,
that's probably the best title just, like, outside of reading it and having read it.
yeah.
Words of Radiance, I actually feel less about that as a title, honestly.
Mhm.
Oathbringer, love as a title. I think that's a
I
great.
said that too after I was saying to Josh, I was like, I take it back. It's Oathbringer.
Yeah, Oathbringer I think is actually,
Yeah.
like, a great title. So Game of Thrones, like, A Game of Thrones I think is an excellent title.
Mhm.
I think A Game of Thrones is very evocative, having not read the book, and it's also very descriptive of what is
Yeah.
happening within the book.
Yeah.
Similarly, A Clash of Kings meant nothing to me when I hadn't read it, but I actually quite loved it as a title after I read the
Yeah.
book. So I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, this is," like you said, very literally what the book is about. Storm of Swords feels so lazy comparatively.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Where was my Storm of Swords in that book?
Right?
I disagree. So I'm very curious to see how I feel about, A Feast for Crows
Mhm.
as a title once I read the book.
Yeah.
Um, Having not read any of the books, I did think A Feast for Crows was one of my favorites, just reading it, like, not
Yeah.
having read the books. I quite
Yeah.
like that.
I'm curious because I'm in the camp that I think you're gonna like Feast for Crows as a
I'm
book.
Too many people that I think know my reading tastes have said that. I'm
Yeah.
expecting to quite enjoy A Feast for Crows.
Yeah.
So,
It's an interesting read. It's not spoilery at all. There's just new POVs in that book that I'm curious to see what your opinion is gonna be on them. There's one in particular that I'm quite curious about.
it's
Um,
Circe.
no, it's not.
Oh, it's not? Okay. Okay,
No,
'cause I was like, "That's
it's a
something more."
new POV. It's a new
Okay.
POV.
Well, Circe
Um,
hasn't been a POV yet.
it's a new character.
Oh, it's a new character, okay.
Yeah. So I'm misspeaking here. It's a new character and a new POV.
Not to be so annoying. I'm like, "Well, we haven't gotten a Circe one."
Yeah, no, it's been so long since I read them. Like when I was messaging you, I was like, Jamie's my favorite character. And you're like, but he hasn't spoken yet. And I was like, is that true? Like I couldn't remember because it had been
I
so
mean,
long.
everyone had told me Jamie was their favorite, so, like, I knew something was gonna happen there. Yeah, it's so interesting reading the books with, like, randomly so many spoilers, and then randomly I won't have been spoiled on something,
Yeah.
like what
Yeah.
happens, like the titular thing that happens in A Game of Thrones, like, somehow not being spoiled about that, like,
I don't know how. I just don't. Like,
I mean, I think I was is the real answer. I think I was spoiled on it at some point and just,
put it out of your brain space.
like, why did I need this information? So I put it out of my brain cells. That
Right.
was probably the other funniest moment of reading A Song of Ice and Fire, was probably
Yeah.
that. Um, and me messaging Leanna constantly, because Leanna was the only one who knew I was reading it when I read it,
Mhm. Yes, you were
because it
very
was gonna
sneaky
be a
about it.
surprise for Kyle. Actually, what
Mhm.
happened is I wasn't gonna tell anyone, and then similar to you, I was like, I literally cannot read this book without talking to someone.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
I need to put my feelings somewhere about a
Mhm.
quarter of the way through the book.
Yeah.
And messaging Leanna the whole time, Ned must be, what did I said very specifically, Ned, I think is, a war criminal. That's gonna come out. I thought he was Downer because I was like, well, he's like the main character, so. And it's so funny looking back at those messages because Leanna would never make a comment on it. She would just, like,
Mhm.
heart it and never say anything. And it
Anything?
was
Yeah.
like, um, she was like, how do you comment on that? Like, she was like, I just
Don't.
thought for sure you knew. And then you were
Yeah.
saying these things, and I was like, I'm just gonna just not comment.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I read it because the show
Hmm.
had the first episode and I was like, well, Sean Bean's the main character. And I was like, okay, and he plays Ned. So Ned's obviously our main character. And I got to that point in the book and I was like, okay, like we are not screwing around here. But I was so of the opinion because I am this way in fantasy in general. I just always think someone comes back to life, like
Oh, do
always. I'm
you?
like, yeah, I'm like, oh, well, they're not really dead because fantasy's ruined me where we bring back so many characters. And I'm like, well, he'll probably be back in like the next book. And then I got through the next book and I was like, oh no, he's dead. So, yeah.
I mean, I still remember where I was. I guess we just spoiled that out loud. Maybe just put a
It's
warning.
been many, many years. So
Yeah,
I'm
except look
less
at
worried about
the
it.
experience I had with it not being spoiled.
Yeah.
We were actually not by my choice camping. I hate camping. Zach hates camping. We are not campers. Long story, but we were camping when I was finishing this book, and we were reading it, and I seriously remember I was like, Zach, this thing just happened. This character just died, but like he's the main character. And I'm confused though because the scene isn't really like ambiguous.
Mhm.
Like you can have an ambiguous scene where, but I'm like the character like witnesses it happening.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of confused. And he was like, "Well, who was it?" And I said, "Well, it was Ned Stark." And he's like, "Everybody knows Ned Stark dies." And I was like, "What do you mean everybody knows Ned Stark dies? I didn't know Ned Stark died." Like what? Um, so I have like that, like it was
That's a core
anyway,
memory.
another roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I am totally skewed with fantasy in general that I'm like, unless I am presented with a body in like a funeral, I assume that they're alive.
And I do, my dad, I actually when I was 10, we went and saw Jurassic Park 3 and a character died and I was kind of upset about it. And he's like, "You didn't see the body, they're not dead." And I literally quoted that to him so many times. There's so many fantasy books. I said, if I don't see a body, they're not dead. And it's true 99.9% of the time. But
Yeah,
we saw a body very specifically. So like, if I see a body, I'll believe they're dead in
I
fantasy.
generally am the same way, but I think in this case because I was like, well, he's the main character.
He's the main character.
So,
No, I
yeah,
I
I was like,
understand.
that won't
I was
happen. But
also delusional.
yeah, I've messaged you though about a theory I have for Stormlight 5 with a character, and I'm like, oh well, I think they'll be there. So,
Yeah.
it's like I I just don't really believe it. Like even when I was watching the One Piece adaptation, when we got into Zoro's story, like and his background and why he is the way that he is, I was like, I don't buy that this person is dead. Like I just
Oh,
don't.
I
So I
see.
looked it up and they are. Yeah.
I do. See, I do believe those sorts of things in general.
Oh, I don't.
That's so funny because I disagree with you about what you told me about Stormlight 5. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree, Rogue,
So
because he's
everyone
Sean Bean.
everyone says this. I've gotten this joke. Okay, look, I'm just gonna say, guys, I've gotten this joke like 500 times, like because of my journey this year. But it's like I get that that's the joke, but it's he can play a character that survives. So it's not
There's a
actually true.
couple.
Is
There's a
all I'm
couple.
saying. Do you know what I
He
mean? Like it's
I ironic too because he plays Odysseus in the Troy movie and is the only one that lives.
yeah,
So,
so it's maybe an all or nothing with Sean, you know? It's
yeah,
you
he's a
never
committer.
know. It's
He's
a box
either
of
really
chocolate.
dead or last man standing. It's one or
He's
the
either
other.
shockingly dead or shockingly alive. There's just really no in between.
So, speaking of Sean Bean, when I was going through my watching of all these things postpartum, I watched the extended editions of Lord of the Rings about 7 times. And
Amazing.
I had forgotten how much they cut of Sean Bean in Two Towers, like a lot. There was so much extra Sean Bean in those movies. I was like, huh, like most of what they cut in this movie involved Sean Bean, which is wild to me. But
They
yeah.
it's actually really interesting to see the stuff that they cut. Like the problem is that it all blends together. I was talking to my
Mhm.
friends. We just watched Two Towers the other day together, and
So good.
I was like, it all like I can't remember anymore.
Mhm.
What's in the non-cut? What's in the cut? Like it all like I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't
It's a
tell
lot of
you.
Sean Bean. So if you're not seeing a lot of Sean Bean, you're not
Then
watching
you're
the
watching the wrong one.
extended version. But yeah, I was really surprised. I could not remember that at all. And it was funny because as I made Josh sit down and watch it for like the seventh time because I just didn't want to watch anything else. I was like, we're
I
just
get it.
gonna watch Lord
I
of the
want that
Rings
comfort watch.
and that's gonna be it. And his ranking is 2, 1, 3 of the movies. Mine is 1, 2, 3, but I love Two Towers still. And we were both of the opinion we're like 1 and 2 are like up here, and then there's 3. Like 3 is
Mhm.
significantly less than the other two because so much of it is a fight scene. But I was like, when you watch the extended edition, it's so good. Like 3 is so much better. I don't know why they made the editing choices that they did, but
I don't know if I can rank the movies. Once again, they all kind of run
blend.
together. Like I do
Yeah.
know a lot of the big events. It's hard for me because Return of the King as a book is my favorite.
Okay.
Um, because I like cried at the end when I first read it, which it doesn't happen very often. I was like very
Yeah.
emotional at the end of Return of the King.
I don't cry when I
Um,
read, so I hear you.
yeah, I don't cry. I mean, I wasn't like sobbing, but I did get really teary eyed.
Yeah.
Which was a really weird experience. I don't usually do that at 10. So it's like hard. I think ultimately Two Towers is my favorite movie. I think I'm kind of in agreement there. Like there's just so much good stuff that happens in Two Towers.
I love them
Um,
all, but I will say it was I think for me, the defining factor was when I went to go see the first one, I went with my mom and my friend, and we waited about a month and a half to go see it because it was just sold out
yeah.
every time that we wanted to go. And I was like, well, I don't want to be crammed in the front where like I don't really get to enjoy it. Even with waiting a month and a half, by the time we got to the theater, I was in the front row. Like it
Oh my
was the
gosh.
worst. And my neck was cranked back all the way to actually see the screen. But the moment where the hobbits are up against the hedge line basically and
Mhm.
the ring wraith is like hovering over was so amazing to experience like that close to a screen that is a core memory for me. And I was
Totally
like,
get it.
it solidifies
And
one for
maybe, hey, maybe this is why Two Towers is my favorite.
maybe.
Because Two Towers was actually the first one I saw in the theater. Because I
Oh,
hadn't
okay.
seen The Fellowship when it came out, and then The Two
Okay.
Towers came out, and my dad's like, "We should go at midnight, but you need to see," because I hadn't read them. "You need to see," because I was like 10 when Two Towers came out or whatever,
Mhm.
and he was like, "You need to see Fellowship." So we watched Fellowship and then immediately left to go stand in line at the theater to go watch it at midnight.
That's
So
awesome.
that's how I experienced it, and so I think Two Towers is the first one I saw in the theater, and I wonder if
That's so cool.
that's, like, an interesting connection, like, I wonder if seeing it in the theater was, like, the reason that I still feel very, like,
Yeah.
connected
Connected
about
to it.
that. Same with
Jerry, you're
you.
not that old. It's okay. You're not that old.
You're not that
Uh,
old. We're
no, but
maybe nay, we are young,
we are young. Yeah.
you know, it's the
Yeah.
difference. I
Bookborn
don't
and
know
I
how
are
old I
like
was.
a week and a half apart, I think, in terms of our actual age. It's pretty close.
Oh, yeah, I think we are. We're really close.
Yeah.
That's why we've had the same experiences.
I don't
Two
even think it's a week and
Towers,
a half. I think it's
release
like 8
date,
days.
movie. Let's see. Okay, I was 12 when Two Towers came out. So,
Yep. I was too.
yeah, I was
Yep.
12.
Yeah. So
Um,
good. I
it was
love
amazing.
those movies. I still think that they're the best. I take it back. In terms of adaptations, they are pretty much tied with Good Omens for me for
Good
adaptations.
Omens is such a good adaptation.
So good.
Um,
I love it so much.
really, really excellent.
Mhm.
There's been a few. Holes, it's not fantasy, but
I love Holes. So good.
Holes, the movie is perfection.
Yep.
Um, I was obsessed with that soundtrack.
Yes.
Still
The
have
book's
it,
great.
still slaps. Gonna say it.
I love the book too. It was so good.
The book was so great.
Yep.
So that's like a really good one. There are a few. Fantasy is like definitely harder, and it
Mhm.
is like in fairness, like uh if you're really connected to the book first. Oh,
Yeah.
Hunger Games. I think the first Hunger Games is a fantastic adaptation.
It's very good. Yeah. I
And I
mean,
actually had read and loved Hunger Games before I saw that movie, and I still thought it was really good.
I was in the same boat. I read it first and then saw it. And I think I watched a video that you did on that adaptation, or like adaptations in general, where you mentioned specifically how there was one scene in the book that doesn't make it into the film that people were kind of upset about.
I like your thumbs up. Sorry, I'm just
Yeah,
laughing.
I don't know why it does that occasionally, because it's my phone and it's
Yeah,
like,
it's the end scene.
yeah,
And I
with
I
why.
just made the argument that even though I thought the end scene they chose in the movie was a little weak, like I wish they would have maybe done something else. I also understood completely why they did not do what was in the books. I just do not think it was possible.
I agree. And I remember when I saw the movie the first time, I was like, oh, that's kind of disappointing because it's such a chilling
Yes,
scene in the book.
totally.
And then when I thought about it, I was like, but how would they have done that and not made it look really gimmicky? And I was like, I don't think that they could have. So you kind of just have to ebb and flow with what you can translate from page to screen and make work. But I agree. I think that overall they're good adaptations. I haven't read the new book or watched the new film. Like,
No, I
that's not
haven't
something.
either. I was waiting for the movie to come out. I was gonna read the book and then go see the movie. And
Mhm.
then I was reading A Song of Ice and Fire and was like, I don't have time for this. And then like nobody went and watched the movie. So I do want to read the book eventually. I do.
Mhm,
When the book came out, I was just like, I have a love-hate with prequels because
mhm.
it's like, I don't think I really need to know. I'm not
Yeah,
convinced that what I'm gonna read, it might even hurt my experience with the original book.
sure.
Um, so
Yeah, I'm typically that way. I love
maybe
a
we'll read it
sequel.
together later this year if we have
We
time.
could. Yeah, I'm open. So, I've kind of I
Laura, I'm the
I'm the
worst
worst.
person to buddy read with. If it happens, it'll be me messaging you and being like, "Hey, I'm starting this tomorrow. Do you want to read it?"
That's me. Joanna can attest to this. I am terrible to buddy read with in that I'm either the last to finish or I finish immediately. Like there
Yes,
is
that's
no in between.
like Jake, when Jake wanted me to read Under Heaven with them, the entire time, like even after I bought the book, he was convinced I just like wouldn't be there. He was like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, you say you're gonna read it, but will you?" Like that's like the whole
it's
time
a
it
good
was like
question. It's a good question.
it's
It's so funny though, because like I went and I read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame last week because I was like, I'm tired of people ragging on these books and I want to see like what the thing is about. And you and I have talked about this in the past that like I can get on a hype train and see what the hype train is about, which I did when Twilight came out, even though I didn't love it, just
Mhm.
to kind of say like I can talk about it and have an educated opinion on
Totally.
what's
That's
being
what I did with
discussed.
Twilight.
Yeah.
I've read them all.
And same
Well,
here.
not all anymore. I
Yeah.
don't know. I've read 4. I've read
I
4.
read, yeah, I read four. Is there more than four?
Well, I think she ended up actually publishing that book where it was, like, from Edward's perspective.
Oh, I didn't read that.
Yeah, me obviously, I was not gonna touch that series again. I touched it in
Yeah.
high school when it came out.
Yeah.
That's when I did it.
I didn't read that. But when I was reading these two over the past week, I was like, oh, this actually reminds me quite a bit of Hunger Games. Like a
Mm,
lot of the themes are very similar. And the competition aspect, the like death of characters and named characters aspect, I was like, it's similar. And I was like, I haven't read anything of this genre that's kind of akin to this since
Hunger
that
Games.
time. And I was like, I don't hate it. Like
Mhm.
maybe I'll go back and read a couple of these. So maybe we'll do that Songbird, Ballad of the Songbird, or whatever it's called later
Yeah,
this year.
I think a Hunger Games reread would be fun. I probably won't end up doing it until, like, my son is old enough to read it. I feel like that's what's
Yeah,
happening. Like, I'm like, he gets old enough,
just
I'm like,
waiting.
"Okay, now I can reread this for a little bit to, like,
Yeah.
do it together."
Yeah.
Um, I just don't
Oh,
read
Gary's
fast enough.
not a fan.
Yeah. You know, I'm curious. I've heard polarizing. I've heard a ton of some of my friends really loved it. Some people were like, "It's just unnecessary." I have a feeling, Derry, I will be in the unnecessary camp. Like, I might enjoy it, but be like, also, why does this exist?
Yeah.
That's my guess.
That generally tends to be me. I will say I don't even know if this, I guess it is a prequel. Fire and Blood is a prequel-esque book for our Song of
Well,
Ice and
so was
Fire
A Knight of the
universe.
Seven Kingdoms.
It
I talked
is,
about
yeah,
that in
and
my
I
video.
love that type of thing because it's adjacent, but it's not a direct prequel. Like, the events are important to later parts of the story, but
I think what I don't like about a prequel is when it explains something that happens in the main series. So
yeah.
with A Knight of Seven Kingdoms, like, I know people are like, well, there's characters in it that are okay, I understand
Yeah.
that there's characters in it, but they're not really, because Dunk and Egg aren't in it. Like, they are characters that are completely unrelated to the main series.
Right.
And it's following them, and it's so long in advance that there's only,
Mhm.
you're hearing about kings that you hear about in that, but it's
Yeah.
really thematically a prequel and
Mhm.
helping you have more context for what's happening.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the kind of prequel that I think is like really interesting and beneficial.
Mhm.
Um, I just think too often prequels can unfortunately do one of two things: either undermine a character that people love, so
Yeah.
you change who they are, which
Mhm.
people generally don't like, or
No.
two, over explains things that don't need to be explained and are better just left to the imagination.
100%. It's interesting because so many people over the last year and a half have really loved Legends and Lattes, and then when
Mhm.
Bookshops and Bone Dice came out this year, that was the main commentary that I was seeing. They were like, "It's awkward because we already know how our character is, and, like, we know that this isn't gonna be a thing because she's not at that part of the story in the next book," and stuff like that. So, yeah, it does definitely make things more complicated.
It's like, if you're gonna do a prequel, it needs to be like American Gods and Anansi Boys, which are spiritually a part of the
Connected,
same series, but
but
really aren't at
so
all.
different. Yeah, so different.
Thematically and spiritually, they're in the same worlds, but otherwise they're not. And I just think that works better. I mean, I can think of so many prequels where, I mean, if you've been on my channel, you will know my hatred for Solo as a movie, like unabashed hatred of that movie.
I
And
refuse
it's
to
like,
watch
it does.
it, so you made it further than me.
Okay, I went to the theater. This was baby me who was still thinking that,
Mhm.
like, Star Wars was a property I should go to the theater about,
No.
and I hate it. I hate that movie. Like, I
No,
have an
we
unreasonable,
stopped.
it's like all my anger has been channeled into that movie. I hate it.
Yeah, we went to I never remember the name of the new ones, but we went to the 7th one, and I
Force
was
Awakens.
fuming when we left
Mm.
the theater, like, actively. It was like my body was on fire. I was like I had no words for anyone for like 2 hours. I was like, "Nope, I can't even talk about how terrible that was," and then somehow got dragged to the 8th one, and I think we got dragged to the 8th
The
one because
Last Jedi.
is that the one that has, like, the casino planet? Because
Yes.
okay, yeah, we saw that one in the theater, and I was like, "I'm never doing this again." Like, I
I've
was
seen them all.
so
You know what? I'm a part of the problem. It's in the theater. I went and saw them all.
no, I
Um,
still have not watched, the 9th
Skywalker,
one.
yeah, oh. Oh, it was
Rogue
Last Jedi?
One
No, it's
there.
Last Jedi. Skywalker Rises, The Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker, yeah.
So Rogue
Um,
One is brilliant,
it's brilliant, and I love it. Josh and I were having this conversation a few days
follows
ago.
the
I was
rules I
like,
said, though. It's
uh,
more, it doesn't follow a single, I mean, not a single character, there are
yeah,
overarching characters, do you know what I mean? But
yeah.
it ultimately follows completely new people,
Oh, yeah, and it's
which is why it works.
fantastic.
And
We went
Andor, this is crazy, Andor is a
oh,
prequel to a prequel,
yeah, and it's amazing because they
and
did
it's
it so
incredible,
well.
but once again, it only takes a single character, right?
Yep.
None of the other characters, except Mon Mothma, but once again, like, I mean, I've done so many Andor videos because I love
It's
Andor.
okay. I share your love of Andor because we felt really burnt by Star Wars at this point. Like, we loved Rogue One.
I hadn't watched Andor. I don't know if you knew that, like, I didn't watch it when it came out. I said I
Well, neither
refused.
did
I
I.
said,
You and I were
"Yeah,
talking about it actually because you were like, "I think I might start it," and I was like, "We're actually thinking we're gonna start it too because we have been really angry with Star Wars and we haven't watched it yet." But we both loved Rogue One. Like, Rogue One is S tier for us in terms of Star Wars content.
I love Rogue
So
One."
yeah, like, unpopular opinion for us, it's for top Star Wars film. It's between Empire Strikes Back and Rogue One. Like, those are
That is
our two.
unpopular, I will forgive you.
Yeah, those are
Um,
our top 2. And when I was like, "Okay, we should probably give Andor a chance because it's connected to Rogue One and we love Rogue One so much." And then we watched the first Josh was hooked in the first episode, and I was like, "This is slow. Like, are we getting
I
another
love
Mandalorian
the
where it's
first
really
episode.
slow?" I will say, I was also very postpartum for this and was
Okay.
so tired that I was like, "This is dragging forever. Like, what's happening?" And then in the 3rd episode was so hooked. I was like, "Oh, I'm here." And then
First
that
dairy,
middle arc,
if you
amazing.
Derry, if you love Rogue One and have not watched Andor,
Oh yeah.
oh, you're in for a treat. What
It's
happened to
amazing.
me was I watched Obi-Wan and I said publicly that I would never watch another Star Wars show
Oh, I
again
know.
because
Yeah, it
it
was
was
so bad.
so bad. And so even though I loved Rogue One, I'm like, I literally don't care. I'm not watching Andor. And it was actually Instagram, like the book community, because
Mhm.
I had gotten at least like 12, 13, 14 messages where people were like, I have watched the first 3 episodes of Andor. Like, you need to watch Andor. Like,
Yeah.
you just have to. And finally I was like, Zach, so many people have said it. I will give it 1 episode. I will give it
Yeah.
1 episode. And I actually
Mhm.
just loved episode 1. So it was immediate, like,
Yeah.
some of the best TV I've ever watched.
Yeah, I made my parents watch it because they're big Star Wars fans, but also hated the new trilogy. And they were like, we're definitely not watching this. And I was like, no, no, no. Like, you need to watch this. It's amazing. So
It's
yeah.
gosh. Obi-Wan, I just
That's a whole other conversation.
we don't have this is supposed to be Love Bomb. So
Yeah.
Andor was so fabulous.
Andor, love bomb,
Andor,
Andor.
love it.
So good. Derry, please go watch it because honestly, in
great.
terms of Star Wars content, I think it's the best thing that they've put out in probably the last 10 years.
I mean, yeah, I
It's
rated
awesome.
Andor. When I did my ranking video, I ranked the original 3 on the top, and Andor was also up there.
Mhm.
And then I rated Rogue One 1 step below with with the Phantom Menace, and I stand by it. I love the Phantom Menace, and
I
I
know you
just
do.
don't care what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, I love that artwork that was sent to you
Oh
of
my gosh,
the
I'm staring at it
oh, so
on my
great.
wall.
If you guys don't know this, Bookborn was sent Amidala artwork and of like their
Yeah,
outfits and
so,
stuff.
I went on a big rant in that video about
Yeah.
the icon that is, Natalie Portman in the, prequels, just talking about how, like, actually, like, the prequel costuming in a lot of ways is what people think of when they think Star Wars. Like,
Mhm.
I think people are coming around on the prequels now, but
Yeah.
for a long time, people always have said, like, they were the worst things ever, and honestly, like, a lot of things people think about Star Wars happened in those prequels,
Oh yeah.
um, particularly costuming. And I was going on and on about how, like, I was so obsessed with
Because
her
her
costumes.
costuming are amazing in those films.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. And,
Mhm.
one of my subscribers' wife, had done a special art project for I think it was, I can't see it from here, but it was an anniversary of the movies, and it was an event happening at Disneyland, and they sold special edition prints that she
Yeah.
had done, and they're fashion illustrations of all
So
of,
cool.
her looks. There's 2, there's the queen's looks and the senator's looks.
Yeah.
And I said, "Can I buy them?" Like, when he said this to me, he's like, "Isn't that so cool?" And I was like, "Yes, where can I buy?" And you can't. He's like, "She can't sell them to you because they were a special edition." But she sent me a proof copy that they still had.
Which is
So,
amazing.
I mean, I framed them immediately. They are like the
Wait.
prime. They have prime real estate in our office, and definitely one of the coolest things that has ever happened to me because of
Yeah.
Booktube. Like, definitely like top 5 things.
There's a good competition there going now with like
I said
speaking of
top 5.
Dragonsteel, Sanderson,
Top
that.
5. I didn't say it was the first thing. I said top 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was nice hearing that other people appreciated it as much as I did.
Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, I can't even talk about it, Derry. I just can't.
I can't even I mean, I have issues with General Leia as well, but Carrie Fisher is incredible.
Oh.
It's so hard for me not to make a comment on it. I'm so sorry. We can move on quickly though. It's just General Leia in is my problem with what people think about strong female characters,
Yep.
which is just that, like, Leia in the original trilogy as Princess Leia is, first of all, the first main character we meet. I feel like people don't recognize that. She is the first person on screen. We do not meet Luke or Han till later. It is the opening scene with her
Yep.
of A New Hope. And in that scene, we see her standing up to the dictator of the universe, lying clearly trying to be a major part of the rebels. And throughout the movies, like she is literally integral. There are so many scenes with her giving the plans, the whole party listening to her. She is the one. She's the head of. She's considered the figurehead, basically, of the rebellion.
Mhm.
And so this idea that like, aha, now, well, it was a meme that was going around at the time. I've grown up to see my princesses become generals. And it bothered me so much because it was like the idea that the term general is the reason that Leia is strong now, because if she's a princess, she's not.
Yeah.
It's like in many ways, like I don't need Leia to have to force fly through space, which I also can't talk about,
I
to be
can't
honest.
talk about it before. I just
Um,
can't.
it's not that General Organa is a bad character. It
Mhm.
just the idea behind it misses so much of the boat of like Leia was just Leia. She was a princess. Um, that's true. And I totally get that. Like, yes, her slave bikini is not a high point, but I do love Carrie Fisher, what she said about it. Like, her
Mhm.
quote lives rent free in my mind. She's like, yeah, I did wear it. And then I killed the person who made me wear it, like on screen. Like, I think people forget that Leia kills Jabba. Like,
Yep.
she kills him. She is very active in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And like, yes, I am not a fan of the slave Leia outfit. I'm with you, Terry. Like, I'm so grateful we are clothed. Actually, even as a kid, I had a huge problem with a scene in the second prequel, Attack of the
Mhm.
Clones, like where it bothered me so much. Padme's outfit gets ripped perfectly
Across
to just
the
bare her
abdomen.
midriff.
Yeah.
Like as a teenager watching that, it bothered. Like I was already bothered by that,
Yeah.
like obvious ploy.
Mhm.
So I get that, but I think like as a character, Princess Leia is always in command.
Yeah.
She's an active participant and role. And so I hate this like idea that she wasn't and that they were correcting it to
Mhm.
be general. Like I just think it's so typical of the misunderstanding of what it really means to write
Yeah.
complicated characters. And it's
Yeah.
all over those movies,
Mhm.
particularly with Rey.
Yeah.
That misunderstanding is everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, I think people forget, like, Luke is considered to be a pretty whiny kid. Like,
Oh,
and that's
he's super annoying.
that's the point, though, like, he has
Mhm.
growth. Anyway, I
Han is my favorite of the OG. I'm just saying, like, Han
well,
is
that's
my one.
also the correct opinion.
Yeah.
Han is, you know,
I love him so much, like,
Han is
full
great.
stop. Mm.
I mean, that was the other hard thing I should say about prequels as well, for characters, if you're doing a character prequel, is that generally they've already gone through their character arc.
Right.
So, that was why I think Solo also failed, because Han has a full
Yeah.
character arc,
Yeah.
um, within the trilogy, and so if you make a movie, you also want the character to go through some arc, but
Yeah.
can't really because he's already
Mhm.
gone through an arc, and
Yeah.
so
Unless they're 3 distinctive phases of a character, it's like, okay.
it's tough. Um
Mhm.
And, that's why also Andor works so well because really in Andor, the person having the character arc is really Jin.
Yep.
And
Or in
so
Rogue One, you mean?
what did I say, Andor? Yeah, I
Ro
meant in Rogue One. Oh, that's
Yeah.
why Andor works because in Rogue One, it's really
Yeah.
Jin that is going through the character arc, not
Correct.
Cassian. And then
Yes.
in Andor, Cassian is now we are experiencing his character arc.
Yeah, and
Um,
I loved how they've done Rogue One. Like, I'm super excited for when we're gonna get season 2 of that show, just because I think in terms of
can't wait.
what has been made in the SFF sphere in the last couple years, it's top for me. Like, there's
For
nothing else
sure.
that's been as good. So I am really excited to see what comes of that. But
And it's not adapting anything.
no.
It just did so many things well, and gosh, it really was. You're right. It was just like some of the most excellent TV in
Mhm.
the sci-fi sphere or fantasy sci-fi.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, everything about it really. The acting is excellent, the storylines, and I like how they did mini arcs without
totally.
making it feel like you were missing out or it wasn't long enough or anything. Everything just felt appropriate in that show. So,
Derry, did
you're
you
fine.
watch that video from that YouTuber Pop Culture Detective? Is that Pop Culture Detective's video? Because I've seen it as well. I just wonder if that's the video she saw.
I'm
It
curious.
actually it's a pop culture detective. I don't even know if he's doing videos anymore. All of his videos were like an hour long, and they were the most excellent videos
Hmm.
ever. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing actually when you watch that. I still am able to separate it, understanding the issue. I think the biggest thing that was hard for me was reading Carrie Fisher's memoir and hearing about what actually
Yep.
happened was tough for me. And I actually recommended people not to read it. I was like, if you would just like to be happy with your own
Don't read
memories
it.
of Harrison
Yeah.
Ford, don't read it.
I actually chose not to because I watched a lot of interviews with her about it. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just let that live in my brain as it is.
Yeah, and
And
that was a smart
not
choice.
worry about it.
Gary, I am sure we watched the same thing because it was ages ago. It was like literally years ago that I watched that video. Um, and yeah, it was super eye-opening. I loved that channel because it would take things that I loved and definitely was eye-opening about it.
Mhm.
I still do love my Harrison Ford movies because
Me too.
I do, but it did color it a little bit. It was hard.
Indiana Jones is one of my
I love
favorites.
Indiana Jones.
Raiders of the Lost Ark is
I
just such a good movie.
Raiders of the Lost Ark is
It's
such a good
why
movie.
it's in part why I wanted to be an archaeologist and studied archaeology.
It's
It's like,
an
oh
amazing
my
movie.
goodness. Yeah, exactly. So before we leave, speaking of characters and stuff, what would you say, or who would you say rather, are like top three characters for you right now? It could be past characters, characters you're
Oh,
currently
geez. Like,
reading.
just in general,
In
characters.
general, characters you love and you wish got more love from other people.
Oh,
I will say
wow.
mine is Light Song, everybody.
Wait, is this underrated favorite characters or just favorite characters? This is like an impossible
Anything
question.
anything you want.
Okay, let's see. Obviously, well, I'll leave out Harry Potter. Moraine from Wheel of Time. Um, love me some Moraine. I'll give a recent one, Catelyn. I cannot believe how the fandom treats Catelyn. Everyone, everyone wants me to do a Catelyn defense video now because I did a Sansa one.
I know.
And I'm like, I will. It needs a reread though. Like Catelyn's so much more
Mhm.
complicated than Sansa. Sansa was
He
easy.
is
Uh,
really
Catelyn's
complicated, Catelyn.
Catelyn's complicated. I just love Catelyn. Kelsier is my favorite Cosmere character. It's not going to age well, and I don't care. This doesn't even matter.
That Parks and Rec
Um,
thing that you and I both simultaneously shared about Kelsier, I have never done anything wrong ever,
oh,
and, like,
yes,
oh my gosh, it's perfection. So good.
that's exactly right. That is it. That is the Parks and Rec Kelsier is like exactly how I feel about
Oh my
Kelsier. So
gosh,
you're right.
it's 100%, 100%
You're right.
apt. Mhm.
Oh, someone who I think is underrated is actually Bilbo Baggins.
Okay,
Um, I just think Bilbo's an underrated character. I don't know why I
okay.
feel that way, but I do. So I'll also say Bilbo. And Derry, we didn't get to talk about Bookron. I have a video essay to send you. Um, can you
Bookron
like come
is
into my DMs
GOAT.
so I
I
can
love Bookron, and they really did
so
me
I can
dirty.
send you this video essay that changed my life. Well, it didn't change my life. I already had the opinion, but the way that somebody presented it changed my life. Because you know when you watch something and you're like, "Finally, someone took
Someone
everything in
gets
my
it.
brain and said
Yep.
exactly what I feel."
Mhm.
Um, I'll send it to you. Danny. I've made a lot of people watch this. So,
Yeah,
have
that's perfect because
I
we
made
should
you watch
get the
it?
news print. I probably already watched it because
I
I
bet you
probably
have.
went looking for it because I love Bookron and was so angry that they kept giving all of his things to Hermione in the movies. I was like,
Well, it
"Stop,
also
guys."
people always wanna focus on how it ruins Ron, but it really ruins Hermione as well.
Mhm.
Um,
I agree
first, let me talk about
completely.
Marsh is one of my all-time favorite Cosmere characters as well.
I love March, and I kept so when I read Mistborn, I was updating Bookborn, like, probably more than I should have with my feelings on every single character, and I kept saying, I was like, "I love Marsh so much." So, yeah, we're definitely
Marsh
Marsh
is
fans.
amazing. I think Kelsier has a lot of charisma, but, like, Marsh is definitely my homeboy. He's, like, the one I'd
Yeah.
actually wanna be friends with,
Yes,
not Kelsier.
exactly.
Keltier's a cult leader, which is, like, great.
Yeah,
Yeah, Hermione, I think again, what's really hard is like I think so many girls related to Hermione because of her flaws. A
yeah.
lot of us had been called bossy. A lot of us had been called too much and too
Know it all.
overeager
Yep.
and
Mhm.
all those things. And so when you remove those things and
Mhm.
it removes actually a significant portion of her character.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so much of Hermione and I kind of forgotten about this just having reread the first book. Like, she's not super likable for the first half, right?
well, have you seen that interview with, I think it might have been the director or producer of the first book. I'm not movie.
Movie. Chris
Have you
Columbus,
seen the
I
interview
know,
with him?
directed the first two.
It was
I've
either or it might
watched
have been the third.
so many
It might have
things.
been the third. I don't remember. It was a director or producer of one of the early movies.
Was
One
he the
because I
one
know
that
the
made them
first
write
two
the
was David.
letters?
What? No, no,
Was he
no.
the one?
It was with
Okay.
J.K. Rowling. It might have been. I just can't remember. I know David, or I mean, Chris
Yates?
Columbus did the first two,
Two. Yeah. Then
and then
I want to say his name was like Alfonso something, and then David Yates did
okay, it was either Chris Columbus or David Yates. It wasn't
okay.
Alfonso. It was one of those two. I don't remember, but it's
Okay.
an interview with J.K. Rowling, and it's so fascinating. I feel like it must have been Chris Columbus or one of the other people, or it was a writer, screenplay writer, because it's so different to how people view the books now. Because in that interview, she's talking with him, and she's like, "I was so excited when you told me Hermione was your favorite character because
Mm,
everyone's favorite character is always Ron. Ron is
yeah.
so lovable, and Hermione's hard to love." And he
Yeah.
talked about how, yes. And it was so interesting because now a lot of people have this opposite opinion. Ron is hard to love. Ron is unlikable. Hermione's the best. And
Yeah.
I think the movies have changed people's, like, I will tell people, like, if you haven't read the books in a while and your best memories are from the movies, you remember different characters. And it
No,
was
very
so
much so.
interesting to see this like early 2000s opinion that was everybody. She goes, all the letters I get, Ron's the favorite. Ron's everybody's favorite because
So
he's the friend.
interesting.
And he's a friend to Hermione. And the
Yeah.
way they change it in the movies is that he's not a very good friend to her. And
Yeah. He's
so
not a good friend to anybody.
anyway,
Yeah.
and so I think it's very interesting that there's been like a huge rewriting of history that
Mhm.
Hermione is really kind of unlikable. And the
Yeah.
only reason I liked Hermione so much is because I saw so much of myself in her because I think I
Yeah.
sometimes was a very unlikable kid.
Yeah.
I mean, I was pretty insufferable in a lot of ways Hermione was. And I think a lot of girls were.
Yeah.
Like J.K. Rowling really was able to write a character that I think so many girls like really identified with.
Oh, that was 100% it for me. Like, it was an interesting experience. I'm monopolizing you here. I think my camera stopped working, so give me 1 second. But when I started reading the book series the first time, I was like, "Oh, I'm not super into this story overall." And then it took me distancing myself, and then I came back in the second book and I really loved it. And I loved so much of Hermione because I was like, "Oh, it's okay to be smart and opinionated as a girl and not feel like you can't say those things or raise your hand in class and be like overeager."
Well,
And
and also, someone
bossy,
pointed
you
out once
know?
to me that Hermione's also very, emotional.
Yeah.
A lot of those kind of characters tend to be very, like, cool, and not
Mhm.
driven by emotions, but it's
Yeah.
very interesting that, like, as logical and smart and right Hermione is, she can get very blinded by her emotions,
Yeah.
which is also something that, they don't do often in that character.
Mhm.
I do have to go because
Yeah.
we have a thing
I was
I have a
trying to wrap this
thing
up before, and I was like, "Oh,
tonight,
we're
and
getting
it's just
to our 2
hard with
hours."
Harry Potter.
Okay. I'm sure everyone knows where to find you, but if not, please tell them where they can find you.
Bookborn on YouTube, bookborn.reviews on Instagram. Those are the only 2 places. Come say hi.
That's it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in our chat. This was super fun. As always, remember, it's okay to share what you love. And even if we're going through a dark time, you can lean back on the things that you love and tell people all about them because chances are you're going to find someone that loves them too. So thank you all. If you're catching it on a replay, tell us what you've been reading, what you're watching, the stuff you like, and how Andor is excellent in the comments. And you should go follow Bookborn if there is like a 0.5% chance that you're not following her already. So there's that. Thank you. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.